Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. We are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. The chairman of the board, Mr. David Reed, is here today. Hello, Mr. David Reed.
Welcome back, Jared. Welcome back.
I missed you guys on Friday, although I got a little bit of a head start. I was trying to think of the right way to say this. I would say, I don't know. I'm trying to think of the right way to say this, and I can't even come up with it. I was a little sad to be off on Friday with so much going on, but I am back today, and I just want everybody out there to have had a great Memorial Day weekend, a long weekend. A lot of people graduated from schools at some point this month and everything else. And, of course, to always remember what Memorial Day stands for and why we celebrate. So if you listened to the last segment of the midday show, then you did hear Adam Vingan bring up that, oh, my God, Jared Stillman went out of his way and admitted that he was wrong about something, which, quite frankly, doesn't happen very often. And I would say it doesn't happen very often because, quite frankly, I don't think, and I could be wrong about this, I don't think I'm wrong very often. But I do admit when I am wrong. And today is another example of me putting my hand in the air and admitting that I am wrong, that I was wrong about Tim Corbin. I know. I said the same thing last week when Vanderbilt caught fire after they beat Tennessee 2 out of 3, came home and swept Kentucky, and had a bunch of momentum going into the SEC baseball tournament. But Vandy just keeps getting better and better. As good of a spot as I thought Vanderbilt was this time last week, they're in a better spot. They're the SEC tournament champions, and they are the #1 overall seed in the NCAA baseball tournament. Who a year ago saw the pendulum swing? Just absolutely swing in favor of Tennessee, away from Vanderbilt, and right into the hands of Tony Vitello in this state. Who saw this coming? And I'm going to say, not me. And if there ever was a statement to be made in an SEC tournament baseball game, it was made on Saturday when Vanderbilt ruled Tennessee 10-0. And one of my biggest complaints and one of my biggest criticisms of others are people that just refuse to get with the times. Not because they can't, but simply because they don't want to. There's a one way they know to do the job, and that's the only way they're going to do it. Well, in my day, the way we used to do it, well, guess what, Gertrude? It's not your day anymore. And in college athletics, the era with which Tim Corbin built a dynasty, in probably one of the hardest places in America to build any dynasty in college sports, he built it around guys like David Price and Pedro Alvarez and Sonny Gray and Mike Minor and Dansby Swanson and Tony Kemp and Austin Martin and Jack Leiter. But those days are over. The way college sports used to be, it's over. The way college baseball used to be, it's over. And again, one of my biggest criticisms is of the people that just refuse to change. Well, this is the way I do it. Well, when the entire dynamic of the sport changes, you have to change too. Go listen to Jim Rome. It's the same as it was 20 years ago. Do you even know where to find Jim Rome? And oftentimes when the game changes, it passes up the all-time great. And then it's time to get some new blood in there. Very few coaches are Mike Krzyzewski or Nick Saban, retiring while almost on top. It's often more like old man Jim Boeheim, who started finishing 8th and 9th in the ACC, missing the NCAA tournament, And it was time to go, even at Syracuse, which I'm not even sure had a basketball program before Jim Boeheim showed up. We live in an era, whether you like it or not, of player entitlement and social media. Me, me, me. That is not the era with which Tim Corbin built Vanderbilt baseball. Tim Corbin had to change his philosophy, or Vanderbilt was going to fall into just total irrelevance after losing to Coastal Carolina and High Point last year in the regional while watching Tennessee win a national title. And I'm just going to admit that this time last year, them falling into that irrelevance felt a lot closer than maybe anybody wanted to admit. Years ago when I was in high school, there was a rumor. So this is a rumor, and this is about something that happened at least 17 years ago. But there was a rumor that Tim Corbin was recruiting a local kid. And when he went to watch this local player play high school baseball, summer baseball, something along those lines, and he saw the kid not run out a grounder, didn't like his body language. Rumor has it, Tim Corbin stopped recruiting him right there on the spot. It was a different era back then where Tim Corbin could do that. But the reality is Father Time doesn't stop for anyone. It didn't stop for Bobby Knight. It didn't stop for Nick Saban, who is on a crusade against all of the changes that are coming to college sports. And it didn't stop for Bill Belichick, who couldn't win a football game, has been banished from the NFL, and it feels like is trying to live a life similar to that of Lane Kiffin at this point. Chris Sanders says on the program all the time, it's a cliche, but he says all the time, you have two choices. You can get better or you can get bitter. This time last year, Vanderbilt fans were angry because they knew Tennessee was hot. They knew Tennessee had a young coach who was one of the best in the country. They knew Tennessee had NIL money. They knew their program was headed in a direction that Vanderbilt baseball had not been used to since the Roy Mewburn era. The most nervous people this time a year ago, I think, were Vanderbilt fans. And they looked at a coach who had done things a certain way for a long, long time. And they said to themselves, uh-oh, we're not keeping up with the Joneses. And instead of taking his defeat at High Point last year and saying, well, it was a bad bounce in the baseball and we'll get him next year, instead of saying, well, our pitching wasn't good enough, we had injuries, Tim Corbin said, no, we're embracing the game. Transfer portal we go. NIL money we need. And he did something that, quite frankly, most coaches in Tim Corbin's position would not have done. And he relieved Mike Baxter, a former Vanderbilt player under Tim Corbin, of his duties as the hitting coach. And then he went out and hired Dayton's head coach to take his spot. Talk about stepping up to the plate. So not often do I feel like I'm wrong because I think I can usually see a lot of things coming a mile away. Sometimes I feel like people are like, Jared, you has said that the Titans were, and then week 8 comes around and you realize, man, a couple of those things might have been spot on. But the one thing I'm going to tell you, I did not see coming, especially last year, Vanderbilt getting smoked in a regional, Tennessee winning the national title, Tennessee fans deciding that they like baseball all of a sudden. What I did not see coming was Vanderbilt in less than a year returning back to where Vanderbilt has sat for the last 20 years. I hear all these coaches complain. Dabo Sweeney complains. We need to get Congress involved. The game's not the way it used to be. Didn't hear Tim Corbin complaining. Because once again, the choices are get bitter or get better. He got better. And I look at Vandy and say, I was so wrong about where this was headed. Congratulations to Tim Corbin. Congrats to Vanderbilt. 615-737-1025. That's how we're starting the program. 615-737-1025. As of right now, we are planning to be out at Hawkins Field on Friday ahead of the regional. And I will just say this. I'm going to be totally honest with everybody. I'm rooting for Louisville this weekend. One of my best friends is the athletic director. I was just in Toronto over the weekend with one of my best friends. Willie was talking about the past of Vanderbilt-Louisville rivalry NCAA tournament games. My buddy closed out the Super Regional when Vanderbilt had the number 2 team in the country in 2013. We were just in Toronto at 2 a.m. this morning, and I'm rooting for Louisville, but I am incredibly trying to think of the right word here. I am incredibly impressed by what I've seen out of Vandy baseball over the last month and really what's transpired over the last year. 615-737-1025. That's how we're starting today on the rebirth of Vanderbilt baseball, the rebirth of Tim Corbin, the return to the throne. 615-737-1025 here on the program. That's 615-737-1025. And now we got to talk about the beatdown. The 10-0 beatdown on Saturday of Tennessee. Now, Tennessee is hosting, which good for them. But I wasn't expecting 10-0. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game. I love talking about Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Those are my guys. Hiller takes great care of my home, and they can do the exact same for you. And boy, I bet Hiller is excited about the regionals this weekend because they are proud supporters of both Vanderbilt and the Vols. Nobody wants to deal with a plumbing, HVAC, or electrical emergency. And I know that personally. Most of the time, you don't know what it'll cost, if it will get fixed correctly, or if someone is just trying to sell you something that you do not need. When you call Hiller, their experts are going to solve your problems, and they're going to solve them quickly. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. The price you're told is the price you'll actually pay, with no hidden fees and no surprises on your bill. So book online right now by going to happyhiller.com. That's the same way I book when I use Hiller at my home. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller, call the Happy Face Truck today.
The 0-1. That's swung on. There's a fly ball to center field. Here comes Austin. He's going to call everybody off. He makes the catch. 27 outs. Vandy wins it. The Vandy boys are heroes of Hoover. It's the program's 5th SEC Tournament Championship and the 4th for number 4. It's a mob in center field. Oh, 2025. What a year to be black and gold. Final score on a gorgeous SEC Sunday. It's the Doors 3. It's the Revs 2. Vanderbilt is SEC Tournament Championships 2025.
There you go. That was Andrew Allegretta on the Vanderbilt Sports Network. You can hear all the games, by the way, on 102.5 The Game. You heard that on 102.5 The Game as they clinch the SEC Tournament Championship. And it should be noteworthy when you win the SEC, when all of the top teams in all of college baseball are all in the SEC. You know, they announced the top 4 seeds of the tournament the day before they announced the tournament bracket, and it's Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Texas, and I forget who else, but Auburn, maybe, I can't remember. But 4 SEC teams right at the top. Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable, and it was a great season for Vanderbilt, and you got to give them their due, especially if you were like me and you were hard on them a year ago saying, hey, it looks like you're losing it, and it looks like Tennessee is on their way. But there's something Phil Jackson said in the Last Dance documentary, which is a motto, I guess, that the Chicago Bulls, when they won title after title after title, used to live by, which is you're only a success in the moment that you're experiencing that success. And I don't think Tennessee baseball, and I don't think Tennessee's fans got that memo, because the 10-0 beatdown that Tennessee took on Saturday at the hands of Tim Corbin and of Vanderbilt, a run rule effort, that told me more about the state of the two programs and the state of the rivalry and where Tennessee was than any sort of metric, RPI, look, Tennessee's hosting, and they probably should be hosting, but that 10-0 beatdown told me, no. This is still Vanderbilt's state when it comes to baseball. Now, I'm just going to say that kind of statement victory from Vanderbilt doesn't mean anything when they throw out the first pitches on Friday in both regionals, and these teams won't see each other until Omaha. But I didn't think a year ago, I didn't think there was any way Tennessee would already be back to being number 2 in the state. Now, it's not the same where it used to be, where Tennessee was number 2 in the state and they really weren't on the radar at all. Tennessee's hosting a regional. Tennessee, they're the defending national champions. Tennessee could go to Omaha. Vanderbilt could lose this weekend. We've seen that kind of stuff happen before. But at the same time, I cannot get over the fact that since 2021, when Vanderbilt made it to the College World Series final series and lost to Mississippi State, and Vanderbilt only made that series because North Carolina State tested positive for COVID, the entire team, and so they got kicked out and Vanderbilt moved on to play Mississippi State. But since that moment, Vanderbilt really hasn't done anything. And Tennessee has had the best team in 2022 that they've ever had. They won the national title. They've been to Omaha 3 times. Like, Tennessee had really taken that mantle. And in the span of a month, it's gone. And it goes back to Vanderbilt. And I don't know do I give credit to Vanderbilt or do I put the blame on Tennessee? And I'm going to say clearly it's a little bit of both. Corbin gets his due. And this Vanderbilt team, I mean, it is a sexy baseball team to watch. They run the bases well. They play defense well. They get big clutch pitching in big moments. They can hit with power like they did on Sunday. They can station you to death and take advantage of bad defense the way they did Saturday. But Tennessee can't throw out a base runner trying to steal. Tennessee can't field a ground ball right now. And I think what happened is Tennessee and the new team that they had after last year's team that won the championship, Tennessee smelled their own farts. And guys that weren't a part of winning a national title last year felt entitled like they were. And I think they've kind of learned the hard way. We'll see. They did beat Texas, which was a big step in the right direction for them. But that is an embarrassing loss. There's no way to slice that. And I'm just going to say this. For Tennessee fans who are saying, we won the national championship last year. That doesn't matter. Your one national championship, because it is in the past, is equal to Tim Corbin's 2 national championships. So Vanderbilt has you beaten there. So I'm just shocked to see how quickly the pendulum has swung back in the direction of Vanderbilt. And I think Vanderbilt, with that victory, has claimed the top spot in the state of Tennessee as far as baseball is concerned. And I'm going to say this too. For years and years and years and years, we used to get the occasional caller or texter that would say, why don't you guys talk more Vandy baseball? They would say, why don't you talk more Vandy baseball? Jared, Vandy baseball's good. They're number 2 in the country. Vandy baseball's in Omaha and Vandy baseball. And Vanderbilt baseball had a set of fans in town that loved Vanderbilt baseball. But as far as people actually paying attention to it, on the macro level to where we could invest the kind of time in it, it just didn't have that kind of juice. It had that kind of juice in 2007 with David Price, but it didn't have that kind of juice in 2018 and 2019, and it just didn't have it. There's real juice because Tennessee fans care about baseball now. It used to be Vandy fans in their rivalry would just kind of say, oh, well, we have baseball, and Tennessee fans would look at it and say, we don't care about baseball. Well, now Tennessee fans can't say they don't care about baseball because they care about baseball. They are a proud baseball fan base. Granted, it's a football school, but they love their baseball team. And their baseball team got their fanny spanked on Saturday by Tim Corbin and by Vanderbilt. They got run ruled. I didn't even know that rule existed in college baseball. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Lincoln is going to kick us off. Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Lincoln, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Hey, Jared. I was listening to the last segment before your show as you were talking to Willie and the guys, and the whole thing about James Franklin, which I agree with you. It was sort of really stupid. But the thing that everybody missed that was most embarrassing of all is that sitting in the front row right behind the bench was Clark Lee. By now,
I think everybody saw that. You say everybody missed that. I don't think anybody missed that.
Well, it didn't come up in the conversation, I guess. Let's put it that way.
So I'll put it to you like this, Lincoln. I appreciate your call. I thought James Franklin being in the dugout on Sunday was a total freaking clown move. And I expect clown moves from James Franklin because, quite frankly, even though James Franklin's a good recruiter, I think James Franklin is a clown. I think James Franklin is a baby. Like, I think he's a little crybaby on the sideline who, for whatever reason, James Franklin cannot win a big game to save his life. I think James Franklin is everything that is wrong with college football. I truly believe that. And I really liked James Franklin when he was the Vanderbilt coach, but the way he acted at the end, I thought that was so off-putting. And I always kind of felt like the Vanderbilt-Franklin relationship, I'm not going to say it's like the Titans and Vrabel relationship, but I always felt like there was some bad blood there. Like there was the way he left and what was going on in the program with the rape when he left. I always felt didn't sit well with Vanderbilt. I always felt like the way that he did things, demanding Vanderbilt make changes, demanding students come out to the game, demanding airtime, demanding people care, to only just leave for Penn State. I always felt that rubbed the Vanderbilt hierarchy the wrong way. It certainly rubbed me the wrong way. And so to see James Franklin in the dugout at the Vanderbilt game on Sunday, I thought was a clown move. But I expect that from Franklin. I'm surprised Tim Corbin lets that kind of clown show go on in his own dugout. I'm surprised Greg Sankey let James Franklin in an SEC dugout during the SEC tournament. And I also think, to the caller's point, it's a bad look when the Vandy football coach is not in the dugout. He's supporting the way that most of these coaches go and support the other programs. He's supporting, and you've got another D1 football coach sitting there in the dugout. I don't give a rat's ass if they're friends. I mean, look, my girlfriend works in country music. Last night we were in Toronto at the Post Malone Jelly Roll concert. She's backstage. She's on the stage. Guess who's not? Me. Why? Because that's not my place. And so I thought James Franklin did an interview in the dugout. I thought it was a total joke. I thought it was embarrassing. Like, if I was Vanderbilt, and it's tough because you don't want to go to Tim Corbin after last year when you had to sit down with him and say, all right, Tim, what kind of changes are we making so that we stay relevant in baseball? Then you get the number 1 seed, you win the SEC, and then you say, everything's great, Tim, except what the hell was going on in the dugout? But I do think if I was Candace Lee, and again, this is me, I probably would be saying to somebody, yeah, let's not do that anymore. And if I was Clark Lee, I don't think I'd be very happy about that. Just the optics of it all. 615-737-1025. We'll hit more of your phones. 615-737-1025 here on the program. It's Stillman & Company, 1025-1063 The Game. And let me tell all the fine folks out there, this week's Nashville's Best Deal is 312 Pizza Company in Germantown. 312 Pizza Company serves the best pizza in town, as well as Chicago-style eats like Chicago dogs, Italian beef sandwiches, and more. Head to theGameNational.com/deals to get half off a $30 gift card to 312 Pizza Company while supplies last.
What do you think this year so far has done for the rivalry? Because look, a year ago, Gentry, and I was talking about this earlier in the show. Like I remember, like talking with Tim Corbin after the season, it was kind of like, well, this NIL and everything, and maybe it's just like you're wondering about the future for him. You're wondering about like, is there gonna be a gap that we see wide? And obviously, here we are with this. What do you think this has done for the rivalry?
Yeah, I mean, no question. And you didn't talk about with Corbin. I remember last fall going out to talk with him, and kind of brought up a lot of that with the NIL and changing landscape. And and obviously he's one of those coaches in that Nick Saban category, right? Of one that you would think, oh, maybe he doesn't like how things are. And at the time, he made a point of saying, we want to prove we can do it now with the current setup. And I got a sense even then that Vanderbilt baseball was pretty serious about getting back. They, this is talking about a very proud program that got knocked out by High Point in the regional last year. And that's, it's embarrassing for a program like Vanderbilt. And they wanted to get, I think they did a good job getting it back this year. In terms of the rivalry, sure. Tennessee had dominated this thing pretty good for a few years. And I thought, the SEC tournament game was just one of those days for Tennessee. They just no-showed that one. But the series in Knoxville was one of the most intense and entertaining things that I have covered in my time at the Tennessee.
There you go. That was Gentry Estes earlier today on with Robbie and Rex Road. And I will say, one texter says, Jared, I'm not a fan of either team, but it took Tennessee getting good at baseball for people to care about what the hell Vanderbilt is doing. Gentry, of all people, has told me, he says, when he would write a column about Tennessee baseball and he'd look at the numbers, he says, it's not just the Tennessee fans that are reading about Tennessee baseball, it's the Vandy fans. And when he would write about Vandy baseball, he would say, it's not just the Vandy fans anymore who are reading about Vandy baseball. It's the Tennessee fans. Guess what? Rivalries are good. This is a real rivalry. Vanderbilt versus Tennessee in baseball. They have contrasting styles. I forget who it was, but one of the Vandy players said after the game on Saturday, they don't like us, we don't like them. That's a rivalry. And in order for a rivalry to really be a fair rivalry, you have to have the other side win. That's what makes it juicy. You want to know why Tennessee fans read up about Vanderbilt and why Vanderbilt fans read up about Tennessee? Because they're fearful that the other side will get the better half of them. So yes, this rivalry, I think it's great. And for a couple of years, that rivalry had shifted squarely into the corner at Tennessee. And within about a month and a half, it has swung back the other way to Vanderbilt. And I'm not going to be like Gentry, who just said, well, Saturday was one of those days. Saturday was a 10-0 rear end belt to tush spanking by the Vanderbilt Commodores. Like, if you're Tennessee and you've got some pride, you learn how to field a ground ball. You don't play that way. But no, again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you. I've said this forever. I mean, last year when Vanderbilt fans were pissing and moaning about Tennessee, I said, Vanderbilt fans will never admit this. And it kills them. Because when Tennessee was really good this time last year and Vanderbilt was not, it killed them. Baseball was their thing. And now Tennessee fans have decided, because they got good at it with a foul-mouthed coach, that they want to be baseball fans. That's our thing. But I said secretly it's good. I said it is good for Vandy baseball that Tennessee baseball is good. It is good for Vandy baseball that people care about Tennessee baseball. It is good. One texter says, let's pump the brakes on Vanderbilt until they get to Omaha. This station has been, I don't know what that exact word is, but has been all over Tim Corbin all day. Vandy hasn't been a top 3 to 4 program in the SEC in the past 5 years. They haven't won anything in 5 years. Meanwhile, Ole Miss has, Tennessee has, LSU has, and so has Mississippi State. The regionals haven't even started, and this station acts like Tim Corbin just led his team to a College World Series victory. Let me say this. You heard the cut that we just played, where Joe says, I remember talking to Tim Corbin last year and thinking, where do they go from here with NIL and everything else? Where do they go from here? And Gentry said, I talked to Tim Corbin this fall, and he said, we want to show we can win this way. We can play in today's game. We don't want to be like Bill Belichick and just throw a fit on the sideline and act entitled that everybody treat us like the greatest coach ever, no matter how many stupid things we do, both in our football and personal life, because I won 6 Super Bowls 20 years ago. That's what most people do. That's called resting on your laurels. That is, go check my resume. I know what I'm doing. Well, you're not succeeding. I know. But that's what I did once upon a time. And that's what most people do. Most people just rest on their laurels. Most people get angry. They get agitated. How dare you ask me if I know what I'm doing or if I don't know what I'm doing? Screw you. And instead, Tim Corbin was like, I got to change. And that's the thing that we don't often see when it comes to millionaire coaches. And Tim Corbin is a millionaire baseball coach. That is something we don't often see. We don't see prideful people who believed in themselves to get where they got in the first place, willing to look in the mirror and say, I have to change. And that's what's happened. And to me, I think this is a big deal. One texter says, I wouldn't go this far, Jared, but after the last few years, it was almost like watching Michigan beating Ohio State after a few years drought, and spanking Tennessee like we did was a big statement for the Commodores. I agree. I thought winning 2 out of 3 was a big deal for Vanderbilt and Knoxville. And I thought Saturday was a big game for Tennessee to kind of edge their foot back into it to say, okay, hold on. You took 2 out of 3 in Knoxville, and you're a good team. But we're a good team too. We just beat Texas. We're going to host a regional. And we're going to host a regional because we're going to beat you. So there's not even a question mark as to whether or not, and Vanderbilt beat them 10-0. One texter says, for the love of God, can we please stop talking about Vanderbilt baseball until they make it to at least the super regional? So I will be rooting for Louisville this weekend. I've already said that. Again, like some of my best friends played in that program. I have a lot of respect for Dan McDonald, the coach at Louisville, the number 2 seed in the regional. Somebody that was like an older brother to me when I was in college is now the athletic director. And you all know that I love my school. So I will be rooting for Louisville. I am not expecting Louisville to win this weekend. I am expecting Vanderbilt to win in 3 games. I'm expecting Vanderbilt to beat Wright State on Friday night. I'm expecting Vanderbilt to beat either. And look, there's no guarantee that Louisville's going to win that first game. I am expecting Vanderbilt to win the second game, and I am expecting Vanderbilt to win the third game. And one of those will probably be against Louisville. Maybe both of them are against Louisville. I don't know. I am expecting, and I know Louisville beat Vanderbilt this year at Louisville. I'm rooting for Louisville because that's my school. But I am expecting Vanderbilt to win, and I am expecting Vanderbilt to win in 3 games and move on to the Super Regional. And then after that, I couldn't tell you. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number. 615-737-1025 if you want to weigh in. Roger Goodell said something that may have flown under your radar, but it did not fly under mine. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 1025-1063 The Game. And let me tell all the fine folks that the PFL World Championship semifinals are Thursday, June 12th at Municipal Auditorium, and you can be there. Text in the keyword MATCH, M-A-T-C-H, to 615-737-1025 now to be entered to win a pair of VIP ringside tickets. Visit pflmma.com/schedule for more details.
there's a cap, but there's also cash flow. So I can sign a player, let's say, to a $4 million contract for his base salary, and I'm going to give him a $4 million signing bonus. How the cap works is I can prorate that out, so it's $2 million a year for over those 4 years. But from a cash standpoint, I'm giving them $4 million to sign the contract and $1 million in the first year. So that's $5 million cash out the door, even though it only counted $2 million against the cap. So there's cap accounting and then there's cash accounting. And so the owner don't care about the cap. That's what you have a cap guy to do. It's the cash going out the door.
That was Rich Spielman, who was the former Vikings general manager. He's now a senior advisor with the Jets. That was from last year when he was a host on SiriusXM NFL Radio. And I used that as a cut to play for Joe Rexroad for exhibit number, 88 of how the NFL salary cap is fugazi. It is fake. It's not real. The cap is fake. Again, if a team wants to sign a player, they'll find a way to sign a player. It used to be that we'd say, okay, the Titans have $12 million in cap space. They can't afford to sign Johnny Joe for $13 million. That's not the case. That's what the owners in the NFL wanted you to think for a long time, so that the other owners that wanted to spend more could. And then the owners that wanted to spend less could say, well, we can't afford it because of the cap. And for years, the media that should know better took that hook, line, and sinker. And for years, I've said the cap is fake. And at the beginning, when I said that, you might as well have thought that I said that the earth was flat. But over the last couple of years, I think even a lot of people in the media and a lot of the fans have started to look at the Philadelphia Eagles, have started to look at the New Orleans Saints, have started to kind of keep up with these cap websites and say, wait a minute. That team was $38 million over the cap, stroked 2 checks to players, restructuring contracts without releasing a single player, and now they're under the cap? How does that work? The Buffalo Bills, the cap, it's coming for them, cap jail. Well, they just gave Josh Allen a contract extension. They're going to be paying Josh Allen $100 million a year in new money over 2 years. Cap's fake. And Roger Goodell, during the commissioner's press conference, pretty much admitted it over the weekend, talking about a new deal when it comes to the collective bargaining agreement. And Goodell saying we haven't had discussions yet about a new collective bargaining, blah, 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 says, quote, the 2 areas that we spent time on, talking about he and the union, were really the cap system itself, the integrity of that system, how it's working, where do we need to address that in the context of collective bargaining, and when does that happen? That, at the owners' meetings, Goodell said, was a very lengthy discussion. So here's what's happened. The owners that don't want to pay $300 million for a football team, like Jeffrey Lurie of the Philadelphia Eagles is willing to do, they are saying, okay, enough is enough. I talk about this, and I don't understand. Like, I just think some people have trained their brains to think that the NFL salary cap is real and that every team wants to spend a gajillion dollars to go build up their team, but that dang old cap is in the way, and that's why they can't get past it. That's simply not true. When it comes to cash spending in the National Football League, the Philadelphia Eagles last year spent about $100 million more in cash than the Dallas Cowboys. Well, the Philadelphia Eagles had about a $100 million better football team. So what's happening now is that some of these owners, Cincinnati, are looking at this and saying, no, we're not doing this. Because when we do this, all of a sudden we allow Buffalo, with a rich owner who's willing to spend, to pay a gajillion dollars, and they're going to have a better team than us. I mean, I think the cap is somewhere in the neighborhood of like $290 million or something like that. Here you go. As of right now, according to Spot Track, Cleveland, $366 million. Minnesota, $362 million. Buffalo, $340 million. Tennessee, $287 million. So you're competing with Cleveland, right? You play Cleveland this year, I think, because you both finished in last place. Well, their team is $366 million. Your team is $286 million. Who should win that game? And it is amazing to me how, again, the way our brains are trained, because the word cap is not used in baseball. Do you realize if you spend too much money in baseball? When I was a kid, there was no revenue sharing in baseball until a collective bargaining agreement got passed the last second. There was no revenue sharing, and the Yankees and the Red Sox bought every single player. Every player. Guy would be good for Kansas City, and all of a sudden, he'd go to the Yankees, or he'd go to the Mets, or he'd go to the Dodgers, or he'd go to every single time. Too bad that player's good for the Pirates. He's got to go somewhere else because they can't afford him. And in baseball, because of that, we look at it and we just think the owner has the choice to spend money, yes or no. And that is somewhat true. But there are real consequences if you spend too much money in baseball. You will drop spots in the draft. You will drop 10 spots in the first round of the draft if you spend too much money. Now, let me ask you this. If you were going to drop 10 spots in the NFL draft because your team spent too much money, then you'd be saying, no, Amy, do not do that. So there are real consequences in baseball. There's no real consequence in football. There's none. And so, again, I think a lot of these owners are saying, look, we don't want to be sitting there with Philadelphia, who's going to go out and spend $340 million, and we're going to spend $250 million. We're going to get our fannies beat every time we do that. And because now, every time it comes to buying a player, we say, oh, we can't afford Johnny. And then Philadelphia goes out and pays him while they're paying everybody else too. It's obvious that the system is different for them than it is for us. And so now the owners are starting to push back a little bit. And it's funny because it really is this CBA that has done that. And people will say to me like, well, Floyd Reese believed the cap was real. I'll tell you this. I remember when we were doing the show at my house during COVID, and Floyd told me the rules aren't the same as when I was GM. Because when I was GM, there weren't void years, and there weren't. Supposedly what the Eagles are doing is the Eagles are loading up all their contracts to expire in 2029. So that when all the money comes due and everything else, it'll be 2029. You know when the NFL is going to opt out of their broadcast contract in order to get a gajillion dollars more from whoever pays it? Oh, that's right, 2029. So for all of you people out there that fought tooth and nail with me, Joe Rex Road, that the NFL's cap is real, Roger Goodell, by telling you last week at the owners' meetings that they have had a very lengthy discussion about the cap system itself and the integrity of that system, is telling you the cap is fake. 615-737-1025. A hot take about the Titans. And it is a hot take that I'm not going to rule out. We'll get to that coming up next. Stillman & Company, 102.5 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville Studios, and we are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. So the Titans will be on the football field tomorrow for OTAs. That means we will get to see Cam Ward at quarterback with the Tennessee Titans. That means we will get to see Cam Ward and how many reps he gets with the first team and everything else. But I saw something yesterday crawl across my Twitter timeline that I was a little surprised, A, came out of somebody in the national media's mouth, and B, came out on Memorial Day. But this was Colin Cowherd on his show on Fox Sports talking about the Titans and how different things should be this season with Cam Ward as the starting quarterback.
There's four people, and only four in my opinion, that will change outcomes. Number one is Cam Ward, Tennessee. They were so hard to watch offensively, where even games they outplayed teams, Tennessee was so bad at quarterback with Will Levis. They lost games where they out-physicaled, out-schemed, and outplayed teams. Cam Ward is accurate, moves, coachable. I mean, Miami's had some good quarterbacks. He broke all the Miami records. There's a history of this league when guys come in without a lot of stars and without a lot of pats on the back. Nobody's pandering to them. That's jet fuel. So I think Cam Ward changes outcomes. I think Tennessee's going to be a playoff team.
Whoa now. Tennessee going to be a playoff team. Now, let me just say this. And this shouldn't ruffle feathers, but again, with you people, sometimes I never know. I personally do not think the Titans are making the playoffs this year. And I do not think that you should expect the Titans to make the playoffs. And I certainly don't think you should expect the Titans to make the playoffs because Colin Cowherd says he thinks they will. Especially when Colin Cowherd is saying that the Titans out-schemed teams and out-physicaled them last year, but Will Levis blew it. Because that's just not true. I mean, the Titans never truly out-schemed other teams, and I can't remember the Titans pushing the other team around. But I do not think that the Titans are going to make the playoffs. At the same time, I'm not ruling it out either. You people get on me and you say, Jared, you hate the Titans, and all you do is you crap on the Titans, and you push the Titans down, and you just want to. I am not ruling it out. This time last year, when they didn't have a right tackle, I knew they weren't going to make the playoffs. I knew they weren't going to be very good. This year, again, I'm not expecting it, but I'm not ruling it out. And here's why. Because outside of pass rush, which is the number one reason, if you were to say, Jared, what is your biggest problem with the construction of this football team? As it is right now, I would say they have absolutely no pass rush. Zero. Jeffrey Simmons is their best sacker, and he's not even a 10-sack-a-year guy. But outside of that, the Titans have solved a lot of problems that have plagued them in the past. You know, the NFL always has that team that shocks people. And that's just a blanket statement that every year there's going to be some team that nobody's thinking about who's going to make the playoffs, who's going to go on a run. You will point to Washington. I'm really more so pointing towards Denver. Because last year after Denver drafted Bo Nix in the first round, everybody thought they were straight doo-doo. And they ended up making the playoffs. But again, I can say that about anybody anywhere. We can say that about Cleveland. We can say that about, every year there's a team. So I'm not going to use that blanket statement to justify why I'm not going to rule out the Titans making the playoffs. Here's why I'm not going to totally rule it out. Number one, the division is horrendous. Houston last year was good enough with a young quarterback that they won the division and fired their offensive coordinator, and they've torn down their entire offensive line, and they're revamping their receiver room outside of Nico Collins. Like, they basically said, we need to blow a lot up after last season, and they won the division. Jacksonville's awful, and we'll see with their new coach. Indianapolis, may Jim Irsay rest in peace. They certainly aren't scaring anybody. So that's the first thing. Again, you've got a fourth place schedule. If you beat the fourth place teams that you have to play, i.e., New England, Cleveland, if you beat them, that might be enough to put you over the top and win some games in your division. Number two, the real glaring holes with the football team that people just glossed over last year, particularly on the offensive line, have at least in theory been filled, and not have been filled by a guy who you hope can play in the NFL because Bill Callahan thinks he can play in the NFL, but by somebody who can, actually play in the NFL. Dan Moore Jr. is going to play left tackle. Is he the best left tackle in the league? Absolutely not. But Dan Moore has started for 4 years for a team that has made the playoffs in 3 out of those 4 years. That is a starting caliber player. PT cannot start for a team that makes it to the playoffs. Cannot do it. It is not possible. He's not good enough. They went out and added Kevin Zeitler, a very productive, albeit older guard. But again, he's a starting guard. So the offensive line, that was a total joke. And by week 3 last year, again, I kept banging the table, right tackle, right tackle, right tackle, right tackle. By week 3, the Titans, who had spent all offseason saying, Bill Callahan thinks PT can do it, had thrown in the towel and had benched PT against the Packers. Well, that, at least in theory, is not a problem anymore. And I do believe that Cam Ward, and the question with Cam Ward is, how good is Cam Ward going to be? Is he going to be the next Mahomes? I don't know. But Cam Ward behind this year's offensive line should be an upgrade over Will Levis, who turned the football over and was so bad that it doesn't seem hard to expect almost anybody to be an upgrade over him. Now, Mason Rudolph stunk last year too. So let's not make it out to be like Levis was the only bad quarterback the Titans had. But Levis did lose them games. He lost them the Chicago game. He lost them the Jet game. He lost them the first Jacksonville game. I'm sure if I go digging deep enough, I'll find another one. Levis lost them games. And in the one game that Levis did win them as the Titans quarterback against Houston on the road, he threw a pick 6 in that game. Surely Cam Ward's going to be better than that. I would hope. So when Colin Cowherd says something like, I think Tennessee's going to make the playoffs, I think his logic's flawed. I think for starters, he doesn't actually watch the Titans. When you talk about the Titans out-physicaling another team, you're not talking about the 2024 Titans. You're talking about the 2021 Titans. There is a difference. But when he says he thinks they're going to make the playoffs, while I'd be shocked if the Titans made the playoffs, because I have so many questions about this team and so many questions, and I mean that in a negative way, so many questions about the organization, I'm not going to rule it out. But I could have told you in training camp last year that the Titans were not going to be very good. In fact, I did tell you in training camp last year that the Titans were not going to be very good. And people said, but Jared, it's just practice. I went to a wedding in August, the weekend after the Seattle practices. And I had people coming up to me saying, Jared, we're going to be better than we were last year. And I said, yeah, I don't think so. But Jared, look at what we've added. You don't understand. And I'm like, I've watched them at practice against the Seahawks. They can't get a first down. But Jared, it's just practice. And I know. I could have told you at training camp last year, this team had no hope. I'm not saying that right now. Now, that does not mean that hope equals playoffs. That does not mean that hope equals good pick, number 1 overall. That doesn't mean any of it. I'm just saying that where we sit today, I'm not ready to rule it out, that the Titans could be that team. and that their offensive line should be a little bit better. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. So I do want to go over the issues because there are a handful of them. 615-737-1025 that just kind of keep me from really being ready to say, oh, no, Colin Cowherd says they're going to make the playoffs. They're going to make the playoffs. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game.
With Cam going into that, need to beat out the other three quarterbacks that are on the roster, or are you kind of in a spot where Cam needs to have maybe just enough of a grip on what's going on in your system to have confidence in him to draw that first start?
Yeah, I think there's so much work to be done between now and then, particularly for him. So many things that you have to learn as a young quarterback. So I don't get too far down that road personally with him. We're focused on the next day really at this point. Trying to get him up to speed as fast as possible and get him ready so he can go compete for a job. And that's ultimately where it all lands right now. So not going to make too many proclamations about that, about September here in May. So feel good about where we're at and the work he's put in, and we'll get there when we get there.
There you go. That was Brian Callahan. OTAs, again, are open to the media tomorrow. This is phase 3, which means offense versus defense. Helmets on. 52, 53, said hike. That is tomorrow. Not just Twitter videos of 8 seconds of watching Cam Ward throw the ball in warmups. You actually, and I say you, I'm really talking about the media, we actually get to watch them play football tomorrow, which is exciting. So Colin Cowherd thinks that Cam Ward is taking the Titans to the playoffs. I don't necessarily buy that. But again, I'm not ruling it out. So here are the issues I see with the Titans, because I'll say, hey, they got a lot of questions. Well, a lot of questions mean also that they could have some answers. But when you have more questions, it's probably more likely that you won't get all the answers that you need in order to build a successful team. So here's what I came up with. Number one, when it comes to the 2025 Titans and the 2025 Titans being competitive. Number one, I'm not sure this coaching staff and this coach are, good. I don't know if Brian Callahan's a good coach or not. And I don't know about this coaching staff. Denard Wilson gets a free pass last year because the defense finished second in yards allowed, but they couldn't ever stop anybody from scoring. I mean, even with the game on the line, they couldn't keep Mac Jones and the Jacksonville Jaguars, who had one receiver last year and threw the ball to that one receiver every day. They couldn't keep them out of the end zone. So, I mean, again, Colt Anderson got the boot, which Callahan made kicking and screaming, but he brings back basically the entire offensive coaching staff. He's still calling the plays. We have no idea if he can hold people accountable. He's going to try out this new buzzwordy Fakakta corporate gobbledygook to see if that'll get them excited. So, again, I have a serious question mark as to whether or not this coaching staff is any good. It's a pretty big question to have. Number two, I don't know if the Titans have the running game they need in order to carry a young quarterback. Tony Pollard is a good running back. I don't know, though, if you can use Tony Pollard as a run-first, ball-carrying running back who just pounds that sucker the way Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, the way some of the real bell cows in the league do. And if you go back to Dallas, Tony Pollard never really was a bell cow. Zeke was a bell cow at the beginning of the Dak Prescott era, but when Tony Pollard supplanted Zeke as the main running back in Dallas, they were more of a passing team. So this team needs to be a running team. The way they're built with big offensive linemen, the way they're built with a young quarterback, without a lot of weapons in the passing game, they need to be a running team. They need to run the ball. They need to use play action. And then they need to make things easier for Cam Ward. They need to control the clock, play less of a game. The old man used to always tell me, you want to get good in the NFL, the easiest way to have a good team is to run the ball and play defense. I just don't know that they have the running game in order to do that. Again, I know Pollard's a good running back. I don't know if he can be a bell cow. And I think Tajay Spears is a third down running back. One of the dumber picks the Titans have made over the years. Number three, how are they going to sack the quarterback? Harold Landry was their leading sacker last year. And Chris Sanders said, oh, well, he ran into a bunch of sacks. Okay, fine. But he still was the leading sacker. And they didn't really replace him. Femi Oladejo, who the Titans took in the second round, had 4.5 sacks last year. But Jared, he moved from off-ball linebacker to edge rusher last year. And so he's got untapped potential, and maybe, but we don't know that. And that's kind of difficult for me to get over. Arden Key sucks. Devondre Sweat doesn't rush the passer. Draymond Jones is a fine piece. But you don't really have Nick Bosa out there now, do you? So how are they going to get after the quarterback? And number 4, if they don't get after the quarterback, which I don't expect them to do, I'm not exactly sure how they can cover, given that their corners right now are Jarvis Brownlee, who had a solid rookie season, but I'm not even convinced is for sure an NFL starter. Roger McCreary, who's a true nickel corner, and a bunch of nothing at corner other than L'Jarius Sneed, who is not healthy, is probably not going to be healthy, and might be in prison. So I'm trying to figure out defense. Like, how's the defense going to be any good if they can't get to the quarterback? And if they don't get to the quarterback, they probably can't cover. That one's a little difficult for me. And then finally, the other thing that, again, I think is a big question, this is more of a reality that people are just going to have to live with. You're not going to like it. I don't like it, but I've accepted it because I know how this league works. It's going to take the Titans' offensive line to gel. They're not going to start off right away. There's no way that Brian Callahan has the cojones to play his starting offensive line for 3 straight preseason games. No way. Well, then they're not going to be in shape in week 1. They're not going to be ready to go week 1. They're not going to be gelling by week 1. They're not going to, it's just not how it works. And you can pay Dan Moore however much money you want to pay him. It's not how it works. So it's going to take a little time. So between that, the coaching staff, the running game, and the defense, I'm not exactly sure how we should expect the Titans to make the playoffs. But who knows? Maybe Tony Pollard is a good enough running back to be a bell cow. Maybe Brian Callahan is really a good coach, and last year Rand Carthon set him up to fail. Maybe Femi Oladejo is Javon Curse. I don't know. I doubt it, but I don't know. 615-737-1025. Our phone lines are by WilsonCountyHunter.com. One texter says, you've talked about it, but I wish they had a legitimate number 1 tight end. I agree. Again, every year we go through the same thing. The Titans basically say Chig Okonkwo is going to be the tight end. And every year, everybody tells me that Chig is good. Before the 2023 season, when the Titans decided to let Austin Hooper walk in free agency and not replace Austin Hooper with a real tight end, they were going with Chig. I said, okay. I said, let's see it. I had a little reservation, but not much. Thought Chig would be okay. He stunk. Last year, Chig was actually better, albeit still somewhat inconsistent, than he was in 2023. But that wasn't enough to move him off of what I would describe as stinking. And so now you're going to introduce a rookie quarterback. You've got 1 receiver. Again, I don't think the running back can be a bell cow, and I still don't like the tight end. That does bother me. 615-737-1025. We'll hit more of your phones at 615-737-1025. Plus, there was a little snippet. There's an article about the great Mike Vrabel that I read at ESPN that I laughed out loud about. And I've got to get your thoughts on it. I've got to get your thoughts and opinions on it. So we'll do that next. 615-737-1025. It's Stillman and Company on 102.5 and 106.3 The Game.
who has final say when it comes to making personnel decisions?
Well, I wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't have wanted to be the head coach here if I wasn't comfortable in my impact on the roster. So we want to, continue to have great conversations with the personnel staff, with me, with Stretch, with coaching. We're all just trying to find ways to bring the right players in here, whether that's first part of free agency, middle of free agency like we talked about, or a draft, or there's going to be players who get released that we'll have to pivot to and have options. So, again, we need to strengthen the roster. We understand that. And again, have some really good conversations about how we get there.
That was the great Mike Vrabel this offseason. And I decided to play that clip because I read a story at ESPN.com today. I was actually waiting at the gate at the airport in Toronto this morning, and I was just looking at ESPN on my phone, and there was a story about how the Patriots are going to rebuild their team. And it was about Robert Kraft and Mike Vrabel and the great Mike Vrabel. And there was a little snippet in there that I read, and I figured, let's talk about it. Quote, Vrabel wasted no time assembling his staff after being hired. He focused on trust, loyalty, and those he believed would be committed to his plan. Vrabel operated with the belief that if alignment is off, cracks could grow and sabotage team success. Stop. So Mike Vrabel, again, according to this ESPN story, wasted no time in assembling his staff. Well, no doubt. But what did he value? Did he value great teachers? Did he value great schemers? Great game planners? Did he even value great coaches? Nope. Mike Vrabel valued trust, loyalty, and those he believed would be committed to his plan. It continues. Of his 28 assistants, 11 previously worked with him in Tennessee, most notably first-time defensive coordinator Terrell Williams and vice president of football operations and strategy John Stryker, a.k.a. Stretch, as well as director of sports performance Frank Pirano. The three men were some of Vrabel's first hires. So I want us to all sit down and be honest here for a second. Because if I had to pick between Mike Vrabel or Brian Callahan, I would pick Mike Vrabel. I think Mike Vrabel's a better coach. I think Mike Vrabel can hold more people accountable. But it's not really about Vrabel or Brian Callahan. Because if Brian Callahan can't coach, Brian Callahan's going to be out of here and somebody else is going to be in here. Isn't the reason that Mike Vrabel failed as a coach, or why it didn't work out here in the end, or at least I think you can argue Mike Vrabel's biggest problem was that he valued loyalty from his assistant coaches over actually valuing guys who could coach? I mean, I certainly would put that atop the list. But again, this goes back to the arrogance of Mike Vrabel. This is why I believe Mike Vrabel is going to fail in New England. People think the Patriots are going to make the playoffs this year with Vrabel as the coach. And this is why I am skeptical of that. This is why I think Mike Vrabel, and if you talk to people in the national media, they act like the worst thing that ever happened to the Tennessee Titans was firing Mike Vrabel. Again, I personally believe, and I know you're not going to like this, but I personally believe John Robinson was a better general manager than Mike Vrabel was a coach. But the reason I think this isn't going to work is because I expect people, when they fail, to look at themselves in the mirror, look where it went wrong, reevaluate, recalibrate, and say, okay, I did this as a coach and I was successful. I did that as a coach and I was unsuccessful. So on try number 2, I'm going to do this differently. But I don't think Mike Vrabel's wired that way. I think Mike Vrabel's thing is, I'm going to do it the exact way that I did it in Tennessee. And the reason that it didn't work out in Tennessee isn't because of me. I'm the great Mike Vrabel, but it is because They're stupid and they don't get it. But I know I get it. Again, I know people are going to say, oh, what do we care about Vrabel? We want to talk about Callahan and we want to. But I do ask this question, which is because I believe that you and I know more about Mike Vrabel as a coach than the people in New England do. I think you and I know more about Mike Vrabel as a coach than people outside of the city of Nashville do. And I have been on record and time again, and I have said, I think Vrabel is a good coach. But his arrogance gets in the way. And here is an example, again, where ESPN has put pen to paper and said, Mike Vrabel values loyalty. He doesn't value good coaches. He values loyalty. And if he's going to sit there and do the Belichick thing where he talks about putting the team first and nobody's bigger than the team and that it's all about the team, then Mike Vrabel should be going to go look and trying to find the best assistant coaches, not the best assistant coaches who will kiss his ass. But we've seen this before. I'll never forget being at the Super Bowl in 2023. So this was the 2022 season. This was the first Chiefs-Eagles Super Bowl in Phoenix. And on Monday night, they had the Super Bowl opening night. And I went to the basketball stadium in Phoenix. I had never been to a Super Bowl opening night before. So I went to the Super Bowl opening night, and they make all the players and all the coaches available. Now, you see it on TV. And so you'll see a player sitting at a podium, here's A.J. Brown at this podium. Here's Devontae Smith at this podium. Here's Jalen Hurts at this podium. Here's Saquon Barkley at this podium. You see that. But everybody else who's on the team isn't at a podium. They're just walking around, and you can just grab them and talk to them or whatever. Coaches are the same way. And so I went that night and waited for the Eagles media to be done. Then they take like this massive break. Then they bring the cheerleaders out for something. Then they bring the other team out there. It's such a freaking dog and pony show, and it's not even good. But I waited because I wanted to talk to Matt Nagy because there were rumors that Mike Vrabel, who had just dismissed Todd Downing as the offensive coordinator, was going to hire Matt Nagy or Eric Bieniemy as the offensive coordinator. That the Titans were waiting for the Super Bowl to be over. They were going to interview the two chief coordinators, and they were going to hire perhaps one of them. And I would have talked to Matt Nagy, but the line to talk to Matt Nagy was through the roof for whatever reason. So I didn't. The next day, as we went on air, the Titans put out a release. Tim Kelly promoted to offensive coordinator, Vrabel's buddy from the Texans. He was never going to hire Matt Nagy. He was never going to go outside the box. He was never going to hire somebody that wasn't going to be a Vrabel yes man. Because Mike Vrabel is of the belief that he could coach any of these 32 teams and that he knows every right way to do it. And that's the arrogance. So I read that in the ESPN story about how he's valuing loyalty and that of his 28 assistants, 11 previously worked for him in Tennessee. And I think some people would say, hey, Vrabel knows what he's looking for. And I look at it by, there's Frank Pirano, the strength and conditioning coach. Remember all the injuries they had when Vrabel was the coach? I look at it and I say, hey, look, there's Stretch, the guy that Vrabel let coach a game one time when he had COVID for no reason. That's how I look at it. Hey, wide receivers coach, Todd Downing. You want to know how much experience Todd Downing has as a wide receivers coach in the National Football League? That's right, 0. But he's loyal to Vrabel. And again, if I had to pick Vrabel or Callahan today, I would take Callahan. I would take Vrabel. But that really says more about Callahan to me than it does Vrabel. Because I'll ask all of you, you can have Mike Vrabel back today, but you have to take the same coaching staff. Hodling, Ackerman, Downing. You have to take those guys Would you do it? Because as this New England thing's going to prove, you don't get Mike Vrabel without the Vrabel crew. And yes, I know Doug Marone's there. And yes, I know Josh McDaniels is there. But it's still the Vrabel show with the Vrabel crew, with the Vrabel buddies, with Stretch and Cowden and everybody else. Would you take that back? Because I'm telling you right now, I wouldn't. 615-737-1025 is the phone number. One texter says, if the Titans knew months before the draft they were going to take Cam Ward, why weren't they more aggressive in the beginning of the offseason to try to get Myles Garrett, who wanted out of Cleveland? Get a veteran quarterback so Cam can sit his first year and learn. It's just a lot of things the Titans could have done to be better prepared for this upcoming season. And the texter says, we've got the money. I don't think you do have the money. I'm convinced the reason why Amy didn't tell them you have to take Cam. I think they gave them a number of what they were allowed to spend. And it did not allow them, over whatever their budget is, it did not allow them to take on the extra $100 million that signing a quarterback and adding those Giants picks would have allowed them to do. That's just something I believe. Lester says, you even mentioning the great Mike Vrabel is much like Tim Corbin letting the great James Franklin sit in the dugout. And yes, Vrabel failed as a coach because he is stubborn and arrogant and will fail again. I don't really know what that has to do with James Franklin, but I find James Franklin to be as annoying sometimes as Vrabel. I think Vrabel's a better coach and can certainly win a big game, and I don't think James Franklin can win a big game. But yes. One texter says, talk all the trash you want about the great Mike Vrabel. He is 10,000% a better coach than the fraud that we replaced him with. And if Amy had a brain and an ego that wasn't out of control, Vrabel would still be the head coach. It didn't work out with Vrabel because the owner is an idiot. So I don't completely disagree with the sentiment that the owner had her head up her ass throughout all of this. But that doesn't mean Vrabel's innocent. I've said the problem was when that team won in 2021, and I don't know why everybody hated everybody. When that team won in 2021, John Robinson, Mike Vrabel, and Amy Adams Strunk all stuck their heads up their tushes and thought their poo didn't smell. And they all made massive mistakes because of it. Tim says, hell no, in all caps, and I'm guessing that's in response to, I could tell you today, you can have Mike Vrabel back today, but you have to take the Vrabel buddy crew. Do you do it? And I think he says, hell no. The next guy says, biggest mistake was firing Mike Mularkey. I have an issue. Again, I think that was a mistake on John Robinson's part. I thought that was a Robinson ego move. Now, Vrabel ended up being a decent coach, so it wasn't as if, oh my God, we fired Mike Mularkey who won some games and we didn't hire a good coach. Vrabel is a good coach, but he's, again, part of being a good coach is being able to hire a coaching staff. 615-737-1025. We'll hit your phones next. Stillman and Company, 1025 The Game.
Houston was offering picks 58 and 79 to go along with a third-round pick in 2026 for 38, where the Patriots took Trayvon Henderson. And you could hear it right there where Elliot Wolf has the phone and he puts the phone kind of down and says, or, puts it down or gets off the call and says to the guys, you guys want to do this? Asking Vrabel and Cowden. And between Vrabel and Cowden, they sort of look over Elliot Wolf and are like, yeah, we should do this, meaning making the pick. And they just put in the card on Trayvon Henderson. And that's when Elliot Wolf turns around and says, get Trayvon Henderson on the phone. And that's what they were doing pretty much the whole time. Elliot Wolf was in the middle on the phone, and Cowden and Vrabel were on either side of him, talking over him, basically, trying to figure out what to do. And then they would tell Elliot Wolf what to do, and Elliot Wolf would then say, okay, you have a deal. Or he turned around to one of the lead scouts there, Cam Williams, and says, okay, get Trayvon Henderson on the phone. If you're just watching it casually,
he's the secretary.
You would think but you would think it's, hey, the power structure, Vrabel, Wolf, Cowden, and the three of them are up front making the call, and it's those three collaboratively. It is not. It was Vrabel and Cowden, and Wolf was the admin. Wolf was the secretary. He was the
courier.
Gertrude, get Fred Wilson on the phone.
There you go. That was 98.5, the Sports Hub in Boston. Vrabel and Cowden. Again, they're running the show. Stretch, the Vrabel crew, Todd Downing, wide receivers coach, Jason Hodeling, assistant offensive line coach. Let's go to your phones, which is driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com at 615-737-1025. Tom is up next here on our program. Tom, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
I was going for a walk yesterday morning, and I ran into Mike Vrabel as he was coming out of a coffee shop with his wife on 12 South.
Great. That's all you got for me?
Yeah, I just, was surprised to see him, and I told him that I missed him. And he said thank you. And that was
Do you miss his assistant coaches too?
No, I pretty much agree with everything that you've been saying all day. I just always liked the guy, but his assistant coaches, not so much.
So here's, again, the issue. Thank you for the call. I like Vrabel too. And Vrabel and I lived in the same neighborhood, and Vrabel and I would see each other out, from time to time. And there was always like a level of, I think, discomfort for both of us when we'd see each other out. I think I could tell this story because, well, I've already told it. But one time I just went in and grabbed a bagel, and I was just sitting down. This was when they had put out one of those stories when Dan Snyder still owned Washington. That was like one of those bombshells that was just about how awful things were in Washington. And so I'm reading the article on my phone. So I'm sitting there in the booth just reading the article on my phone. And as I'm reading it, there's somebody next to me in the booth next to me, but I'm not paying attention. And then Vrabel gets up, and I'm like, oh, it's Vrabel. And we make eye contact. Like, hey, okay, yes. And I definitely got the sense that Vrabel was probably like, that MFer was listening to my conversation. He was spying on me. And I'm thinking dude, I was just eating my bagel. That's all I was doing. I had no idea. I'm over here reading ESPN on the Commanders for whatever that's worth. I like Vrabel. But here's what I don't like. I don't like the fact that Mike Vrabel is absolutely allergic to new ideas or new ways of thinking. And I understand that he's not alone in that. I understand. I get it. I know Bill Belichick was that way. That's why Matt Patricia ended up being the offensive coordinator and not some guy Bill didn't know, because Bill has to do things his way and everybody else has to. But this is the NFL. This is not the mafia. You need the best coaches on your staff coaching your players to develop Drake May, not the most loyal coaches on your staff. I don't know if I'd say Arthur Smith was the most loyal coach on the coaching staff or not, but he was the best when Vrabel was here. And instead, he surrounds himself with guys like Todd Downing. And I don't think that does you any good. One texter says, I take Rustin Webster back before Vrabel and his crew. Now, Rustin Webster was kind of at the end, or at like the end of Rustin Webster was at the beginning of my tenure on the radio. Like, I was familiar with Rustin Webster, but I didn't follow the day-to-day or anything like that. But I will say this. The more I've heard, the more it seems like Rustin Webster as a general manager was really caught between a rock and a hard place. When it came to Ken Wisenhunt and Tommy Smith, he's hired to be, I don't know if he was hired to be assistant general manager, but Rustin Webster was underneath Mike Reinfeldt, who got kicked up to president kind of in the Chad Brinker role. And then Bud Adams gets mad at Mike Reinfeldt because Mike Reinfeldt doesn't want to go all in for Peyton Manning, and he fires Mike Reinfeldt. So now Rustin and Mike Munchak are building a football team around Jake Locker, whom he didn't draft. Then Bud Adams dies. Tommy Smith comes in, hires Ken Wisenhunt without consulting Rustin Webster. And now Rustin's working on a team with Ken Wisenhunt, and Ken Wisenhunt as the ear of the, at that time, de facto owner. Then Tommy Smith gets kicked out. Amy Adams Strunk comes in, puts in Steve Underwood, and Rustin Webster is now working for Underwood and working with Wisenhunt, who was a total clown of a coach. Kind of hard to do your job under those circumstances. Again, not saying I want to bring Rustin Webster back, but I am at least making the argument that, maybe Rustin Webster wasn't as bad as we make it out to be or remember just because. One texter says, flip it around. Maybe Mike Vrabel has tried making new coaching friends, but the more that those guys are around him or interviewed by him, the more they're like, yes, thanks, but no thanks. I do wonder that. I do wonder, are there guys out there that are like, nah, I'm not working for Vrabel? Because Dean Pease quit. Now, you remember Dean Pease retired, Arthur Smith got a job, and 5 minutes later, Dean was unretired. That may be part of it. It's a fair point to make. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Coming up next is the SEC. I already know the Big Ten is trying to nuke college football, or at least what college football is all about. But the SEC holds all the cards. Are they willing to nuke college football? We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville Studios. We are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. And the SEC spring meetings are going on in Destin right now as we speak. All the football coaches are there. All the athletic directors are there. All the baseball coaches are coaching in the regionals, so they're not there. But Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, is there, and he is holding court. And he has set the agenda as far as the SEC meetings are concerned, and it seems pretty simple to me. The agenda at the SEC meetings is to decide what to do to get the most SEC teams in the college football playoff as humanly possible. There are a couple of models that are up for debate. The Big Ten likes the 4+4+2+2 model, which means 16-team playoff, 4 from the Big Ten, 4 from the 4 for the Big Ten, 4 for the SEC, 2 for the ACC, 2 for the Big 12. I believe, what is it, Reed? 2 for the group of 5, 1 for the group of 5, and 3 at-larges or something like that. And Sankey has said there's some people that like that. But Sankey, again, he's worried. It feels to me like he's worried about how do we get the most SEC teams in the playoff, period. Now, I say Sankey has set the agenda. Maybe it's Sankey's bosses who have set the agenda. I don't know. But he represents it. And I got to tell you, I'm a little disappointed. And here's why. Does Greg Sankey want to be remembered as the face of the guy? When we're talking about a historical context, as the face of the guy who gutted college football for profit. Because right now, the SEC and the Big Ten look like venture capital firms trying to buy up big American businesses just to turn a quick profit and sell it off. I flew Air Canada this morning, and I'll say this. I used to be a Southwest loyalist through and through. I still have the Southwest credit card and everything. Used to be Southwest, Southwest, Southwest for me. Now, look, I go to Canada a lot because my son's family is from Canada, and Southwest doesn't fly to Canada. But that wasn't what turned me off to Southwest. What turned me off to Southwest was the fact that Southwest Airlines announced, we're going to start charging for bags. Everything that made Southwest Airlines, they're going to get rid of. Seat assignments. Pretty soon, I'm sure they'll probably have first class. They'll be just like every other airline. And because of that, the loyalty that I've had to Southwest Airlines, I no longer have. Because I feel as if they really don't care about the consumer. They just want to make a quick buck. Let's charge for bags. Even though that's been our big calling card for years, is we're not going to charge for bags. Let's charge for bags now just to make a quick buck. Doesn't it feel to everybody else like college football is headed in the same direction? And that Sankey and his bosses and the Big Ten, they don't care. Just give us the money. I see that all the talks when it comes to the playoff are all about a 16-team playoff and whether guaranteeing 4 SEC spots like the Big Ten wants is a good idea or a bad idea. And I think to myself, why do we need 16 teams in the playoff? I watched a 12-team playoff this year. We don't need 12. We didn't need Indiana. We didn't need UT. We didn't need half those teams that made it to the playoff. And then originally when they decided to expand to 12, which I thought was stupid, I think we only need 8. When they decided to expand to 12, the SEC said we want 14. Now the talk is about we want 16, which makes me think pretty soon it'll be 32 and then it'll be 64 and we'll have January madness all to make a buck. Does that sound like college football to anybody? And that's where it takes me back to the SEC. Again, I understand making money is the core principle for every business in a capitalist society. I got it. But it is alabama.edu, right? It's not alabama.com. Why is the SEC so hell-bent on being okay with the death of college football? Why are they okay with it? Just to make some more money. And that's something I guess I just don't understand. I just don't get it. I don't understand why the SEC, and I understand everybody wants their money, but at the same time, like, you want to ruin college football just to make some money right now? If we have a 32-team college football playoff, and considering that it went from 12 to 14 to 16, I don't think it's crazy to think that 32 isn't far off. Does that resemble anything like the college football that you and I grew up on? I mean, anything like that college football. And at the end of the day, this all traces back to the SEC, because it was Sankey and the league that wanted to expand the college football playoff. They wanted more teams in because they wanted more money. The other conferences said no. The Big Ten said no. The ACC said no. The Pac-12 said no. And at that time, Greg Sankey, like Vito Corleone would have, as the true godfather, went out and absolutely murdered the other four families by taking Texas and Oklahoma as his counterstrike and adding them to the SEC. Once that happened, the Big Ten had to respond by getting USC and UCLA. That led to the demise of the Pac-12. Now we don't even really have a meaningful Rose Bowl anymore. Is the SEC, which is just rooted in tradition, are they really willing to just kill the golden goose? Again, just to make a quick buck? Greg Sankey's out there in Destin right now. He's whining and complaining about the regular season not mattering as much, and he wants more playoff games? That's going to make the regular season matter more? And I understand college football probably feels like they're high and mighty. I get it. It makes sense to me. College football, you get a good matchup, throw it on Fox, throw it on ESPN, and it'll get good numbers. They'll get a lot of viewers for college football right now. But the World Series used to draw 40 and 30 million viewers. It doesn't anymore. Why? Because baseball, again, said, we don't care about, we just care about the money. We don't care about people caring about the games. We don't care about what time the games come on. We don't care about what channel we put them on. We don't care about that. We just want the money. That's it. And it's helped ruin the sport. I think the NBA is going through some of that right now. They won't admit it. They'll take a New York Knicks close playoff game. Now look at the ratings. But the NBA is nowhere near as healthy as it was 20, 30 years ago. Because again, I feel like they care more about the money. I look at college football and I'm saying, guys, are you sure this is the route you want to go? Just gutting everything about college football. And I'm going to tell you what's going to happen with these 4 automatic qualifiers. If this is in fact what happens, you're going to see play-in games during conference championship weekend. So the Big Ten and the SEC get 4, let's just say they get 4 automatic qualifiers. Well, the winner of the SEC championship game will obviously get one of the 4. I assume the loser of the SEC championship game will get one of the 4, which means there's 2 other spots. So we'll have a game that will determine one of those teams, and then we'll probably have another game that will determine the other team. And they'll sell those to the TV networks too. Again, is that college football? Is that the college football that any of us grew up on? It's not to me. And so I laughed because one of the quotes Greg Sankey made, and he meant to say this last week when the ACC commissioner and the Big 12 commissioner put out statements about what's in the best interest of college football. Greg Sankey got on his high horse when talking about those lectures, saying he didn't need a lecture about what's best for the game. Well, I know he doesn't need a lecture about what's best for the game because Greg Sankey and the SEC, and again, I don't think Sankey necessarily feels this way as much as I feel like Sankey is directed by his bosses, the presidents of the universities. I believe Greg Sankey is directed and his bosses. They've stopped worrying about what's good for the game a long time ago. If they were worried about what was right for the game, they get a time machine. They take all the money they get from the TV networks, they build a time machine, and they'd go back to 2021, and they would find a way to keep the Pac-12 alive and keep things the way they were and go to an 18 playoff. They're not worried about that. They're worried about the money. Just like Southwest Airlines. They're not worried about customer loyalty anymore. They're worried about showing up on Expedia.com when someone's looking for a ticket, and they're going to be like every other airline. But do you want to be like every other airline? Do you want to be like the NBA? Do you want to be like baseball? Those two sports make $1 trillion gazillion a year. But would you say the NBA's in a good spot? That Major League Baseball's in a good spot? I'm not sure I would. 615-737-1025. And there is a litmus test, I believe, that is going on when it comes to these SEC meetings this week. I got a thought on that. We'll do it next. Stillman and Company, 1025, 106 for the game.
Bring the audience up to speed of where we are right now with, let's just start with the playoffs, the number of teams, and any other ancillary items that fall in line with that.
Yeah, Dan, well, we know this year we're going to have the same format pretty much, right? We're going to have 12 teams, same format. They're going to go to straight seeding, which they decided last week. But it's starting in 2026 and beyond, where the conversation is around 16 teams. And that does feel like something that's going to happen. Or at least we kind of know that maybe for sure, is that the college football is going to have a 16-team playoff. The question is, how do you decide? How do you determine those 16 teams? So the Big Ten has kind of swung its support behind a model that grants 4 automatic qualifiers to the Big Ten and the SEC each, 2 automatic qualifiers to the ACC and Big 12, 1 for the Group of 6 champion, and then 3 at large. So that would be a multiple kind of AQ type of 16-team format. The SEC, and I'm here at SEC spring meetings now in Destin, they'll talk about that this week, but they as well have been in support from predominantly in the athletic director and president room. They have been in support of that model too. But Greg Sankey did say yesterday, the SEC commissioner, that they're not necessarily officially or formally have adopted any kind of support for a model, but that's the one they've been certainly discussing most.
There you go. That was Ross Dellinger this morning on the Dan Patrick Show, talking about the latest with the college football playoff, saying we're for sure going to go to 16 teams, which I don't know about you guys. We don't need 16 teams in the playoff. That's just me. But we're going to for sure go to 16. The question is it just going to be, the conference champions and then a bunch of at-larges, or is it going to be the 4-4-2-2 model, which is, again, 4 SEC teams, 4 Big Ten teams, 2 ACC teams, 2 Big 12 teams. I think it's 1 group of 5 team, and then however many are left at larges. And the ACC and the Big 12 hate the idea of the 4-2-2. And of course they do, because what they're basically being told is, we are superior to you in every way, and we're going to make double the money than you because we're going to get 2 more teams no matter what. The Big Ten is totally in favor of this because it guarantees them superiority with the SEC, and it guarantees them 4 playoff teams every single year, even one of those years when everybody stinks, with the exception of Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan, which makes sense. The SEC is torn, and the SEC, in my opinion, controls the end result. And so this week, we're going to see how truly stupid the SEC athletic directors and by proxy, the university presidents are when it comes to the desire to go to the 4-4-2-2 model. And here's why. Greg Sankey has brought up that the data, which I would argue is borderline indisputable, the data argues that the 4-4-2-2 model, the 4 automatic bids out of the SEC, would be bad for the SEC. And Greg Sankey knows that. What Greg Sankey and his team have done, because even though I think Greg Sankey is kind of a puppet in all of this, and I certainly don't think that he is intellectually honest on a consistent basis, I don't think Greg Sankey is stupid by any stretch of the imagination. I know Greg Sankey a little bit. I don't think Greg Sankey is stupid at all. I think he is an expert debater because I have jousted with him in the past. And I do think that he comes ready to go. But at the same time, I can kind of see right through some of his bull crap. But Greg Sankey knows the data. His team have taken the historical analysis of what has happened in the past. And would the 4-4-2-2 model benefit us? And the answer is no. The answer is, if you do this, the chief loser at the end of the day is not the Big 12. It's not the ACC. It's the SEC. And people will point to Alabama being left out last year saying, well, wouldn't you like to have the extra bids? But again, if we're going 16 teams and I've got to give up 5 bids because I've got to go ACC, SEC, Big 10, Big 12, group of 5. And now I've got 11 other teams to choose from. History says you're going to get more than 4 SEC teams in the top 11 after the first 5. So he's looking at it saying, if we go to this, there are going to be years where if we didn't have this, the 4th Big Ten team will make the tournament and the 5th SEC team will get left out, and the 5th SEC team will be ranked higher than the 4th Big Ten team. So that's a bad idea. And again, all we have to go off of is what history tells us. And history tells us this is a good deal for the Big Ten and it's a bad deal for the SEC. And yet at the same time, the reporting is the ADs in the room cannot get over the 4 automatic spots saying, oh, but we get 4 automatic spots. I believe, based off of what I've read and what I've heard, Greg Sankey is trying to convince the SEC ADs to not go in favor of the 4-4-2-2 model. And I think he's going to fail. So if the data is indisputable from a historical context, which again is all we have to go off of, if the data is indisputable that this is bad for the SEC, and Sankey knows it, and he goes through a week of meetings where he sits down with these athletic directors and he can't convince them that this is bad, it is the litmus test for me that tells me the SEC athletic directors, and the SEC athletic directors then report to the presidents, and the presidents are the ones that tell Sankey what to do, are stupid. So we're going to see. If they go to the 4-4-2-2 model, then I'm just going to tell you these athletic directors in the Southeastern Conference, no matter how much money they make, they're morons. Because the data says don't do it. The Big Ten saying, yes, do it. Some years we'll have 5 teams, some years, but every year we'll for sure have 4. The SEC is going to have 4 of the top 16 every year, no matter what, and we all know it. So can these ADs, will they take their heads out of their tushies or not? 615-737-1025. One texter says, the NIL and transfer portal will kill college athletics, not just football. College is cutting support staff in smaller sports just to pay athletes in bigger sports. Who is going to be running the training rooms and the equipment rooms? How much longer until college football and basketball, baseball, soccer, whatever becomes minor league sports for their own professional teams? Now, this has always been the minor leagues. Have you not noticed that? You know what's funny? They have made changes to minor league baseball over the years where Major League Baseball has decided, let's let the colleges do more. They'll make money off of it. They'll get fans in the stands. They'll pay for it. They'll develop the players in these nice, these nice workouts with trainers that are paid a lot of money, and these workout facilities, and the nutrition is better, and we don't have to pay for it. And let's let them do it. It's kind of always been that way, guys. One texter says, wild idea. How about the top 16 teams? Ha, ha, ha. Yeah, you think they're going to go for that? Come on now. Honesty? Never. I mean, we don't even have 4 automatic bids for the SEC in the basketball tournament. We're trying to get it in the football tournament. Trevor will join us next. I do wonder, how does Trevor feel about this? About the changes that are coming one way or another to the college football playoff, and really, I believe, the college football landscape and college athletics as a whole. We'll do it with Trevor next. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106 for the game. Stillman and Company, let's go ahead and give something away. Be caller 5 right now at 615-737-1025, and you'll score a pair of tickets to Jet at the Ryman Auditorium. That's Tuesday, June 10th. Be caller 5. Good luck on that one. Trevor Maddich is with us, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. So, Trevor, Greg Sankey has kicked off the spring meetings in Destin by saying he doesn't know what the future is going to hold as far as which model of the 16-team playoff the SEC is going to be in favor of. But he's also upset with being lectured by the ACC and the Big 12 about what's good for the game. Trev, I am convinced that the SEC, I'm convinced going to 16 teams in the playoff is bad for the game. That's just me. The Big 10 wants 4 automatic qualifiers for the SEC and the Big 10. The Big 12 and the ACC are against it. How do you see all of this?
Well, I think it's a big, giant mess, right? And I mean, you look at the thing that kicked off the big giant mess in college football a few years ago was conference realignment, where Texas and Oklahoma went from the Big 12 to the SEC. You had USC and UCLA and Oregon and Washington going from the Pac-12 to the Big 10, and then that led a whole bunch of dominoes in other places. So that was a big bunch of chaos. Then NIL just exploded onto the scene because the courts threw it wide open because the NCAA, which really is the college presidents, that's who the NCAA really is. The NCAA didn't get ahead of all the big money, and so courts got into what the best equitable distribution of the big money would be in college football. So here comes NIL. Now here comes the House settlement, which allows direct payment of players, which is not fully settled yet, but it's on the way. And all of these things have been this massive, tumultuous earthquake of a volcanic eruption of chaos in college football that happened all at once. And now, you know, they're with a cherry on top. They went from the 14 playoff to the 12-team playoff, and after 1 year of the 12-team playoff, they're bickering over whether it should go forward with 16, and if so, how it should be. And right now, there's I think some acrimony between the various conferences because the SEC and the Big 10 are the ones with all the money and all the power. The other Power Four conferences, ACC and Big 12, they're Power Four, but yeah, they're not on the same level as the other two. And every year that goes by, the money is so different that the biggest two, the SEC and the Big 10, will continue to separate themselves from the other Power Four conferences. And then the Group of Five conferences are kind of left in the dust with nothing to really say about it. And everybody right now, I think, is trying to support their own fiefdom and take care of their own business in a way that might be very detrimental to college football as a whole.
Mm-hmm. So do you have any faith that the SEC at some point in all of this is actually going to look out for what's in the best interest of the game? Because up until this point, I'm not sure the SEC at any point, and I think the SEC is the true godfather in all of this. They ultimately decide what happens. At no point over the last 10 years, I think, has the SEC made a decision that is about what's in the best interest of college football. Am I wrong for feeling that way? Do you have hope that the SEC and the university presidents are going to prioritize the health of the game over making money?
Yeah, I think they will prioritize the health of the game to the degree that the health of the game affects them. And I think, you know, when I said detriment of the game, I think it would have been better for me to phrase it like they're looking out for their own interest in the game going forward. You know, and not necessarily to the detriment of the game, but to big changes in the game. And so this is where, I mean, you talked about the money, Jared, and that's sort of the you know, what makes the world go around and everything. And the money's there. It's there to be made. And the question is not, is it there? The question is, what's the best distribution of that money? What's the most fair and equitable distribution of that money? And is it really fair for the Big 10 and the SEC, who have spent, you know, we're talking about SEC, so let's just talk about them, who have spent decades of investment and focus and commitment to build their brands as individual schools and as a conference so that they can command this kind of money. And is it fair for them to have to take some of that and then give it off to smaller schools that aren't really going to compete with them anyway? Is that fair to them? And so, the whole thing, I think, is it's a big giant mess. But I'm not sure that it's terribly bad for college football as a whole when it comes to fans, because ultimately, I think organizations, schools, conferences will find their own level of what they can compete in. And I think that those levels will still find an audience. I mean, you look at the FCS, you look at North Dakota State and Montana and all those folks, they're not making the money that the SEC and the Big Ten are making, or anybody else in the FCS really. And yet they have an audience, and they pack out the stadiums, and it's very exciting, a brand of football on its own level. When you look at the group of five, the Appalachian States and the Troys and the, Miami of Ohio, those folks aren't going away. It's just that they're going to fall far behind where the richer conferences are going to be, but they're still going to be there on their own level. And the problem is when they compare themselves in every way to the Big Ten and the SEC, because then they're just going to fall short and they're going to feel horrible about themselves, but that's not necessary. And that's why I think we're going to end up seeing ultimately the SEC and the Big Ten, as the money just gets so big compared to everybody else for so long, that they'll end up with their own super conference. And that doesn't mean necessarily that the playoff that would be in existence there would not include the possibility for everybody to possibly make it. But it means that when we finally get down to the Final Four, it's still going to be teams from the SEC and the Big Ten, except for an occasional flyer. So is this bad for college football? Let me just close this little part of what I'm saying by saying this. I don't know. I know it will be different for college football because, you look at, we had vinyl records, and then somebody invented CDs, so music became digital, and the vinyl record industry became niche. And then you have MP3s, and you had digital files, and now streaming and CDs are niche, if they exist at all. I haven't seen any DCs. I'm not sure if they exist anymore. But people are still consuming music, right? People used to get around in a horse and buggy. And then Henry Ford revolutionized automobile manufacturing so people could buy automobiles. And the next thing you know, it was motor vehicles that people got around in, and the horse and buggy industry went away, except for certain niche things. And the world of music would not have been better if some overriding commission said, no, we are a vinyl record business and we are staying vinyl records. And music wouldn't have been better because of that. Transportation wouldn't have been better if somebody would have said, automobiles, forget it. We've been horses and buggies forever, and we're staying with that pattern, that paradigm. Well, college football now is moving on to new paradigms driven by the massive money that's there. And between the transfer portal and NIL and direct payment of players from the house agreement and conference realignment and the playoff getting rejiggered to figure out what to do with the playoff, we can talk, you and I, about the specifics that are being proposed and what that might mean in the short term. But in the long term, there's no way to stop this progress. The question is, can each level of college football, Big Ten and SEC, then you've got the ACC and the Big 12, then you got the group of five, can they, at their levels, maintain the things that have made college football great, which is the rivalries and the traditions and all those different things? Can they keep those aspects intact while they're negotiating this monumental change? And if the SEC and the Big 12 go on to become NFL light and everybody else stays college football, well, it's going to be a real loss for people that used to love those two conferences.
Trevor Maddich gets put in as the not just the commissioner of college football, the king of college football. You are now a dictator in college football. What are you doing as far as the playoff is concerned? And how many teams, how many bids, what do you think is right for college football?
I think with the playoff, I think 12 is right. 16 seems to be too much, especially now that we've got 12 games in the regular season. And part of the reason is how it extends everything. There's not that many teams that have to play extra games at the end because they end up winning enough playoff games, and now they're playing, 16 games in a season kind of a thing. Very few teams are going to be exposed to that part of it. But at the same time, I think if you start to add too many games in the postseason, you affect what you can do in the regular season. I mean, at some point, you've either got to lower the number of regular season games, or you've got to fold conference championship games into a playoff, which takes away the impact of conference championship games to a degree and changes the meaning of them. So I think 12 is a good compromise between access and length of the season. And how I would do it, similar to what they're doing now, I would keep the top 5 highest ranked conference champions get an automatic berth regardless of ranking. But I like what they're talking about this year about how you don't get an automatic bye if you're one of the top 4 highest ranked conference champions. Because, I mean, that's how Arizona State and Boise State got a first round bye, even though they were ranked 12th, Arizona State, and I think 9th, Boise State in the actual ranking. So they're getting rid of that. They're going to keep financially those teams whole that would have had to buy, from last year if it were carried forward. So they'll still make the same amount of money. So that's an incentive for them to sign on to the new system in the 12-team playoff. But I think overall we should settle into some sort of a tweaked 12-team format before we start jumping to 16 and more, because it's a lot easier to increase it from 12 to 16 if we feel like we need to 4 years from now than it is to go from 16 and realize that's untenable and drop it back down to 12.
Trevor Maddich, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Cam Ward hits the football field in front of the media for the first time tomorrow. What should we be looking for? We'll ask Trevor next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game. Stillman and Company, Titans on the field, OTAs tomorrow. Trevor Maddich with us, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. So, Trevor, I'm going to start with this for you. Number one, what do you want to see out of Cam Ward tomorrow? And number two, where do you expect them to start him? Do you expect them to start him with the number ones, or do you think they'll work him in slowly? What do you make of that?
I could see a case for putting him with the number ones to begin with. And I imagine they'll do that. I think he's shown a lot by all accounts in terms of leadership, and I think the team is looking to him as a guy that really has potential, and that's important. Jared, you and I have talked a lot about how some of the greatest college coaches, especially Nick Saban, handle quarterback competitions, and a lot of what they choose to do has to do with how their team responds to the quarterback. And so, so far, apparently they're responding very well to Cam Ward. So it wouldn't surprise me if they did. It wouldn't surprise me if they put Will Levis at number one. So I'm not sure what they'll do, but we know going forward long term, this is Cam Ward's team. What I need to see out of him, well, first let me tell you what I don't need to see out of him. I won't mind at all if Cam Ward throws multiple interceptions. That won't bother me at all. Now I get it that they've got their teams within the team that are broken down for competitions and things like that. And now offense and defense, as they start to get into those phases of OTAs. And so you don't want to see the quarterback throw a lot of picks, but at the same time, part of the process now and then in training camp is to push the limits and see where the edges are. And you want to see what your quarterback can and can't do against NFL coverages. You want to see what your receivers can and can't do. The quarterback, a lot of times in OTAs, he'll throw the ball to a receiver on a certain route, even though it's not particularly open, to see if that receiver can go up and get it, and to see if the quarterback can trust that receiver in that kind of a situation. And so if there are a couple of interceptions, it might be that he just messed up really bad, but it might be a situation like they were just trying to push the edges of the envelope. So I wouldn't get too upset if Cam Ward throws some picks until we hear from the coach as to why he threw the picks. And then from a standpoint of what I do want to see is first the operation. I mean, people lose sight of the idea of getting the team in and out of the huddle, getting the plays called, making sure everybody's lined up in the right place and making adjustments to alignment. If a receiver needs to go out 2 more yards from where he's lined up, and then, getting the play called right, and then getting the cadence done, and then all the things that happen before the snap, and he has to actually execute. So I wanted to see him do that. I want to see him, because if he can't do that, then he'll lose the confidence of the team. That's the first thing he needs to really do when it comes to football stuff. And then I want to see him get the ball out of his hand quickly. I do not care if Cam Ward is hero man and unfurls a cape and starts throwing the ball deep down the field and making deep connections to all those fast receivers that he's gotten. This year's receiver group is a lot faster than the last couple of years with the Tennessee Titans. And he'll need to connect down the field. It would be nice if he does, and I'm sure that they will. But I want to see him check down quickly for the 5-yard gain on 1st and 10 and on 2nd and 7. I want to see him get the ball out to the right spot fast. I do not care if he looks like Aquaman and Iron Man and Superman and Batman all rolled into one. I want to see him do what the play calls for, given the defense and given the progression. Those are the things I want him to start with.
Trevor, Colin Cowherd thinks that the difference between Cam Ward and Will Levis, the games Will Levis gave away last year, is going to be enough for the Titans to make the playoffs this upcoming season. Do you share that same optimism?
No, I don't think the defense is good enough. Most quarterbacks taking number one in the draft don't go to the playoffs their first year. It's just because of the team that's around. And so I think that's very optimistic. I heard him say that, and I can see some of the points that he made. For example, the first 2 games of this last season, the Titans outplayed the Bears and the Jets, but lost both of those games. And they lost those games mostly because Will Levis had a combined 5 turnovers in those games. And so, the Bears were held to like 265 yards by the Titans. And yet the Titans lost because they only scored 17 points. So the next game against the Jets, The Jets had like 148 yards total offense, but they beat the Titans because the Titans only managed, 17 points again, in part because of 5 combined turnovers over the 2 games by Will Levis. And so, I see the point that the Titans last year outplayed some very bad teams and still lost because of Levis and Levis's mistakes. But I don't think they're in a position to be able to go make the playoffs this year with confidence. They might do it. They might. Because the offensive line, if it can stay healthy, is a quantum leap forward. The receiving core, if guys can turn speed into production, is a quantum, massive leap forward. Just Gunnar Helm at tight end, the draftee out of Texas, I think has the potential to be a game changer because, people look at his 40 time at the combine, he ran a 4.84, but he sprained his ankle when he was doing that. And he didn't tell anybody until afterwards. And when you look at pictures of his ankle, it was swollen, misshapen, miscolored. It looked really ugly. He never should have ran that. And he ran a 4.84. But he's faster than that. When you watch him in Texas, he's faster than that. He's got good hands. And just being a reliable outlet at tight end will be a game changer for this offense. And so, I think there are reasons to have hope that the Titans can that they might be able to make the playoffs. But I wouldn't say, yes, they're going to make the playoffs because there's still so much that they have to prove.
Last one for you, Trevor. If you were Brian Callahan, if you were the head coach of the Titans, would you actually be running a competition at quarterback, or would you know, hey, when we kick the ball off week 1, it's going to be Cam Ward in Denver?
No, I would actually be running a competition because the team will know if he's BSing. And the thing about Brian Callahan last year, I don't know that his performance garnered a ton of confidence from the team. And this year he's doing a lot of things differently, but one of those things I think has to do with making everybody, and that means the quarterback too, earn their job. You and I spoke last week about how at OTAs last year, you and I went out there and I spoke to an individual who's no longer with the program, who had firsthand knowledge of the quarterback competition in the offseason last year. And he told me that it wasn't a competition, that it was Will Levis's job and that was it. And then Levis had 5 turnovers in the first 2 games and they lost the 3rd game, got blown out by Green Bay. And then, and coach stayed with that. And I don't think that helped him. So right now, I think he knows that Cam Ward is going to be the guy. But I think he has to treat the quarterbacks as close to the same as everybody else as possible so that everybody knows that you're a professional athlete and you can get the job done or you can't, but that nobody will be allowed to drag this team down because they didn't earn their position because they didn't have to.
Yeah. Trevor Matich, as always, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trevor, great stuff. We will talk next week.
Thanks, Jared.
Yep, Trevor Matich joining us on the program. 615-737-1025. So I apologized earlier today because 1 year ago, there was something that I absolutely, positively did not believe. I did not believe was likely to happen. And it has happened. We'll get to that next. STILLMAN & Company, 102.5, 106 for the game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game National Studios. We are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. And I have got to give credit where credit is due, because of Vanderbilt and Tim Corbin, they have earned the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA baseball tournament, and they kicked some serious ass this weekend at the SEC baseball tournament. And I actually watched the games, especially that spanking of Tennessee 10-0, which I thought was going to be a big-time statement game. I was out of the country in Canada this weekend, so I had to use the VPN to get the app to be able to watch the SEC network, to watch Vanderbilt absolutely annihilate Tennessee. And it kind of hit me. And it kind of hit me about change. And I've said this time and time again with Tim Corbin, so this isn't what hit me. But a year ago, Vanderbilt was in the Clemson Regional as the number 2 seed. They lost to Coastal Carolina, the 3 seed, and then in the losers bracket game got walked off by High Point, the 4 seed. They were in a bad place. Vanderbilt fans on Twitter were openly questioning whether or not Tim Corbin could still put together a championship caliber team. I certainly looked at it, and I thought Tim Corbin was going to keep making the NCAA tournament, but I didn't think Tim Corbin would be competing with Tennessee anytime soon. But that's the difference a year makes. Last night, I was in Toronto at Sky Dome. A year ago, I found out I was having a kid. My son was in Etobicoke with his grandparents. A lot changes in a year. Jelly Roll was playing last night at Sky Dome. And how many years ago was it the Jelly Roll thing? He'd be selling out, along with Post Malone, selling out Sky Dome. A lot can change over the course of a year. And that's what's happened at Vanderbilt. A lot of times when things start going the wrong way, coaches will either listen to the fans and make a bad mistake. Coaches will be pressured by athletic directors and hire people they don't want to. I feel like I know Vanderbilt well enough to know that Tim Corbin wasn't forced into a corner to make any changes he didn't want to make. But he made the changes that he felt like he knew he needed to make. Gentry Estes was on with Robbie and Rexro today, and he said he spent time over there in the fall talking to Tim Corbin and said, hey, Tim Corbin indicated to him that, hey, I'm going to have to make some changes around here. We're going to try to do this way. He changed the coaching staff, replacing Mike Baxter as the hitting coach. Mike Baxter played for Tim Corbin at Vanderbilt. He went out and jumped into the transfer portal with 8 new players coming from the portal this past year. 7 of the 11 most used hitters, the position players, were gone. And Vanderbilt proved, whether it was against Oklahoma, whether it was 10 runs against Tennessee on singles, or whether it was via the home run against Ole Miss, they can hit. They can pitch. They can play defense. They can run the bases. They can execute a hit and run. They double steal on a fake bunt. They look different. And so I started thinking, I go, okay, 1 year ago today, what did I think of Vandy baseball? And what did I think of UT baseball? And 1 year ago today, I thought Tennessee was headed to the top and they were not going to be kicked off the throne. Now, that doesn't mean that I thought Tennessee was going to win a back-to-back national title, because I didn't think that. But I didn't think Tennessee would be struggling to be able to host a regional. Now, they are hosting a regional, and they did beat Texas last week. But I didn't think Tennessee would be struggling to be in the top 16 the way they were when all was said and done. I didn't think that they would be getting beat by Vanderbilt 2 out of 3 in the regular season at Lindsey Nelson Stadium. And I certainly didn't think they'd be getting beat 10-0 in the SEC tournament to a Vandy team that a year ago could not score. 2 years ago, I was at the Vanderbilt Regional because a roommate of mine from college was a coach on Xavier's staff. Vanderbilt couldn't hit in that tournament. So it got me thinking. I did not see this coming. And I owe Tim Corbin a load of respect for the way he was able to adapt to the game, make the changes, and be able to prosper this past season. So I thought, okay, this time last year, we would have thought more of the same from Vandy. Dominated again by UT. Vanderbilt fans freaking out. And if UT had dominated Vanderbilt this year the way they had the last couple of years, Vandy fans might have been calling for Corbin. Like, it might have been close. So what do I think is going to happen 1 year out from today? Because, again, I think that, we got to call a spade a spade. I didn't see this happening a year ago. So let's start at the very top. Here are some of my, where I sit today, predictions, things I'm not calling it. I'm not guaranteeing it. But this is just how I feel the cookie is going to crumble because I was so wrong about Vandy baseball and where they were headed. So let's start with the first thing that I think about 1 year from today.
Number 1.
I believe that a new coach will be coaching the Tennessee Titans, and that guy will be brought in to either quote-unquote fix Cam Ward or quote-unquote maximize Cam Ward. The same way Ben Johnson has been brought into Chicago to maximize Caleb Williams. I believe that's what will happen here. I hope Brian Callahan does a good job. I'm rooting for him because I am a Titan fan and I am a Callahan fan. But as far as what I actually think is going to happen, I do not think this time next year that Brian Callahan will be the head coach of the Tennessee Titans. They will have a new offensive coach that will be hired to maximize Cam Ward. That's number 1.
Number 2.
I believe at this time next year, Carl Taylor, who is the head coach of the AHL Milwaukee Admirals, will be the interim head coach of the Nashville Predators. I do not think Andrew Burnett will survive the season, and I think there is a legitimate chance that Carl Taylor will be named the next head coach of the Nashville Predators. Look, I understand what Barry Trotz is thinking, and I actually thought, and I predicted that's what was going to happen, was they were going to bring Burnett back. They were going to look at the first 5-game start and blame that they're going to make a couple of moves here and there. Nothing major, but they'll make some moves here and there. They'll try to run it back next season and get a different result, and I just don't think that's going to happen. Again, I don't think the Predators are willing to make the changes that Tim Corbin made. So I believe this time next year, Carl Taylor will be the head coach of the Nashville Predators. He's currently the coach of the Milwaukee Admirals, and there may be a chance that he gets the interim tag removed. So I do not think that either Brian Callahan nor Andrew Burnett will be coaching their respective teams this time next year.
Number 3.
I believe the University of Tennessee football program will have purchased a new quarterback to quote-unquote save the program. Look, this year, the kid they got, Aguiar, they're just trying. That was the best of a bad situation after Nico left and went to UCLA. Josh Heupel's going to win some games. Heupel's in no danger of losing his job, and he's in no danger of losing the fans at Tennessee. But I do believe after this season, when they go 8-4, when they go 7-5, knock on wood, when they go 6-6, because of what they don't have at quarterback, Tennessee will pay top dollar, and they will bring somebody in to be the quarterback, and that person, regardless as to whether or not they actually are the savior, that person will be viewed as the savior of Tennessee football. So this time next year, there is a guy that maybe we haven't even heard of. I had never heard of Cam Ward before his last year at Washington State. There's going to be some guy like that who's going to be the next savior of UT football, and they'll be pinning all their hopes on him.
Number 4.
Mark Byington, the Vanderbilt basketball coach, will have Vanderbilt in the Sweet 16 next year. I don't know what the transfer portal looks like. I don't know what the roster looks like. I don't know. And again, Vandy basketball, they had this problem this year where they get out to a 20-point lead in the first half and completely blow it in the second half. And I don't know if that's the coach's fault or not. I just got a feeling that he's the right guy for the job. I got a feeling that you'll know by year 2 that he is, in fact, the right guy for the job. Put me in for Vandy in the Sweet 16 next year in basketball.
Number 5.
Finally, Bill Belichick will be fired at North Carolina. He doesn't leave on his own. It's not mutual. It's not. This time next year, Bill Belichick will have been fired from North Carolina, and Bill will go right off into the sunset along with Jordan Hudson, whom we will not hear from again until Bill gets inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. 1 year from now, Bill Belichick will be fired. So a year ago, I didn't think there'd be any shot Vanderbilt would be the number 1 seed in the tournament. I didn't think there'd be any shot Tennessee would be taking as much water on the boat as they have this year. So that's what I'm thinking today. And if I'm wrong, I'll apologize. The same way that I've apologized to Vandy baseball because I did not see that coming. 615-737-1025, which is the phone number. The Empire struck back this weekend when Vanderbilt beat Tennessee, and not only beat them, but embarrassed them. And I got to tell you this, I'm going to tell the Tennessee fans the same thing I told the Vandy fans last year. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
What do you think this year so far has done for the rivalry? Because look, a year ago, Gentry, and I was talking about this earlier in the show. Like I remember like talking with Tim Corbin after the season. It was kind of like, well, this NIL and everything, and maybe it's just, like you're wondering about the future for him. You're wondering about like, is there gonna be a gap that we see wide? And obviously here we are with this. What do you think this has done for the rivalry?
Yeah, I mean, no question. And you didn't talk about with Corbin. I remember last fall going out to talk with him, and kind of brought up a lot of that with the NIL and changing landscape, and and obviously he's one of those coaches in that Nick Saban category, right? Of one that you would think, oh, maybe he doesn't like how things are, and at the time, he made a point of saying we want to prove we can do it now with the current setup, and I got a sense even then that Vanderbilt baseball was pretty serious about getting back. They, this is talking about a very proud program that got knocked out by High Point, in the regional last year, and that's it's embarrassing for a program like Vanderbilt, and they wanted to get. I think they did a good job getting it back this year. In terms of the rivalry, sure, Tennessee had dominated this thing pretty good for a few years, and I thought. The SEC tournament game was just one of those days for Tennessee. They just no-showed that one. But the series in Knoxville was one of the most intense and entertaining things that I have covered in my time at the Tennessee.
There you go. That was Gentry on with Robbie and Joe this morning. By the way, I just pulled up Twitter. Apparently Joe earlier today was on the Paul Feinbaum show from the beach. I mean, Joe should just ask Feinbaum if he can use his set instead of whatever audio that was he was using this morning. But apparently, Paul Feinbaum just tweeted a video of Joe talking about the Big Ten and the SEC. So make of that what you will. Good for Joe. Now, I do want to get to this. Last year, when Tennessee was kicking that ass, Gentry Estes, and I'm glad I played the Gentry Estes cut there. Gentry Estes said to me, he goes, you should see the readership at the Tennessean when it comes to UT baseball and Vandy baseball. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, the amount of people that read about UT baseball and read about Vandy baseball, he was shocked by, because what he realized was Vandy fans were reading everything that he wrote about UT, and UT fans were reading everything that he wrote about Vanderbilt. Now, Vanderbilt's been good at baseball for 20 years. Ever since Warner Jones and Ryan Mullins and Jeremy Sowers, and they went to the Super Regional for the first time, I believe, in 2004. So they've been good for 20 years. The last time they were the number one overall seed was in 2007. That was David Price and Dominic De La Osa and Pedro Alvarez and Mike Minor. And they've obviously been to the World Series in 2011. They won the whole thing in 2014. They won it again in 2019. Vandy is not new to this. Tennessee, over the last 5 years, has kind of had their cherry popped as far as college baseball is concerned. Tennessee fans learned the hard way, just like Vandy fans did in 2007. Just because you're the number one overall seed in the tournament doesn't mean you're absolutely positively going to win the championship. They went to Omaha in 21, and they learned how tough it can be when you're hitting the ball out of the ballpark every pitch at Lindsey Nelson Stadium, how hard it can be to win at Omaha. And then they did. So Tennessee's been there and done that too. And this time last year, Vanderbilt fans were mortified. Absolutely mortified. Not only about their own team. That wasn't the biggest problem. The biggest problem to them was that Tennessee was elite. Baseball was our thing, Vanderbilt fans thought. Look, even though occasionally James Franklin could beat them in football, they're better at football, and they're better at basketball, and they're better at women's basketball traditionally. But baseball, Vanderbilt fans thought that's our thing. And they hated it. It burned at them that for the last couple of years, UT was ahead of Vandy. And I said, Vandy fans, you're going to hate this, but it's good for you. It's good for the game. It's good for the rivalry. It's good, to Gentry's point about the readership of UT and Vandy baseball at the Tennessean. It's good for Vandy baseball, for UT to be good, because more people care. Chad Withrow was on our show last week. He said, look, I've gotten into college baseball because UT's good. I guarantee you, Chad Withrow, he hates Vandy. I guarantee you he cares more now about Vandy baseball than he did all those years that we and me and him and other people, we used to say, we can't talk about it on the radio. Well, now, that was last year. Vanderbilt fans, it's good that UT is good. It is good for you that UT is good. Tennessee fans, it is good for you that Vandy kicked that ass on Saturday. 10-0. A 7-inning run rule. I have never heard of that before. Like, that's what they used to do in high school. I mean, that is crazy. Tennessee got run ruled. And Gentry can say all he wants. Yeah, that was just another day. Was it, or it just wasn't their day? Was that really just not their day? This isn't Major League Baseball where you can play a game in May, lose 10-0, and it really not mean anything. This is college baseball in the SEC tournament against your top rival, who just took 2 out of 3 at your barn. You just beat the number 1 team in the country. You're trying desperately to host a regional, and they kicked the crap out of you. You can't tell me that was just one of those days. But I actually think it was a good thing for UT. Again, I think it's good for the rivalry. Rivalries are good when both sides win. I mean, we never look at Rutgers and Ohio State and think, yeah, that yearly Rutgers-Ohio State rivalry, because one team wins all the time. That's why if I were to ask a Tennessee football fan, David Reed, you're a UT football fan, who is your biggest football rival?
Florida.
He's not going to say Vanderbilt. It's not Vandy when they don't win. They don't win. Like, the other team has to punch back. So this year, Vandy punched back. 2 out of 3 at Lindsey Nelson. And again, that rear end spanking that Tennessee got on Saturday. And I think it's good for Tennessee. I think it's good for the game. I think it's good for the rivalry. And here's the other thing I think it's good for. Tennessee, between Thursday and Saturday, saw the entire spectrum of their entire season of what is possible and what is not. On Thursday, they beat Texas, the number 1 team in the country. Probably, I assume, the most expensive baseball roster that there probably is, unless LSU or somebody like that is paid a little bit more. But they beat Texas, which tells me Tennessee on the right day, even though they've struggled in SEC play, losing a lot of 2 out of 3 series, they can beat anybody if you can beat Texas. Then on Saturday, if you can't field the baseball, if you can't stop runners from stealing, if you can't go to the bullpen, you could get knocked out at home this weekend and we all forget about you. And Tony Vitello doesn't have to tell them because they just experienced it. John Calipari used to always talk about this. Vanderbilt beat the Anthony Davis Kentucky Wildcats in the SEC Tournament Championship in 2012. And Calipari said after the game, we needed that. That they needed a butt kicking so that it wasn't Cal telling his guys, hey, if you don't show up, this is what's going to happen. And them saying, yeah, okay, coach. No, You'll lose to a team that's not even going to make it to the Sweet 16. So it's crazy because I get it. I've been involved in rivalries and I have teams I hate and I get it. But last year, as much as it pained those Vanderbilt fans to watch Tennessee be good at baseball, not just be good, be elite at baseball while they were losing to High Point, I said, hey, it's good for the game. It's good for the rivalry. It's good for people around here to care about. And at the same time, I'm telling you right now, UT fans, no UT fan will ever admit, hey, Vandy baseball right now has taken back the top spot. They have. While that may just be temporary, I don't know. But it's a good thing that happened on Saturday for both of you. 615-737-1025. One texter says, Jared, what do you think about the Vols having better odds to win the College World Series than Vanderbilt? I find that kind of shocking. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be able to tell you, like, I know the matchups. I mean, I know who Vanderbilt's going to have to get past in order to get to the Super Regional. They're going to have to get past Louisville, and I know Louisville baseball. And right now, the pitching staff is a nightmare. I mean, there's a school in Louisville, a D1 school, Bellarmine, and I don't think it would be fair, and I mean this with all due respect to Bellarmine, and I have a lot of respect for Bellarmine, and I think Bellarmine has a lot of respect for me, but I would not compare it to Belmont or Lipscomb or MTSU. It would be a step below that. Louisville got beat by them a couple weeks ago. They're getting one and done in the ACC tournament. They're getting crushed in some of these ACC series. Vanderbilt should walk through this regional. But I can't tell you about the draw UT got and the super regionals and everything. I couldn't tell you that. Where they came up with the odds about who will win or who won't win. I will say this, and I did think about this because I saw Tim Corbin yesterday after the seed drop. You know, he had a media availability, and he was talking about how it's the first time they're the number one overall seed in the tournament. They've been number two a couple times, but it's the first time they've been number one since they got beat in the regional at home by Michigan in 2007. And Tim Corbin was talking about that, and I was like, man, I do not feel the same way. That 2007 team I thought was on their trip of destiny to at least the World Series final, probably winning the whole thing. Definitely not losing in the regional. Whereas with this Vanderbilt team, I think anything's possible. I think they're going to win the regional, but I still think anything's possible. 615-737-1025 is the phone number, 615-737-1025. The Titans media will see something tomorrow that they have never seen, that you have never seen, that I have never seen, that, again, nobody who's not a Titan has ever seen. We'll get to that next. Tillman and Company, 105 the game.
There's 4 people, and only 4 in my opinion, that will change outcomes. Number 1 is Cam Ward, Tennessee. They were so hard to watch offensively, where even games they outplayed teams, Tennessee was so bad at quarterback with Will Levis. They lost games where they out-physicaled, out-schemed, and outplayed teams. Cam Ward is accurate, moves, coachable. I mean, Miami's had some good quarterbacks. He broke all the Miami records. There's a history of this league when guys come in without a lot of stars and without a lot of pats on the back. Nobody's pandering to them. That's jet fuel. So I think Cam Ward changes outcomes. I think Tennessee's going to be a playoff team.
That was Colin Cowherd yesterday. The Titans on Twitter have put out a video. It is 10 seconds long. Boy, you got to love this time of the year, of Cam Ward. It says target acquired, and it is a picture of Cam Ward throwing a ball down the sideline. Brian Callahan in the background. Cam Ward throwing the ball down the sideline to Calvin Ridley, who made the catch on the pass against, I believe it was Mike Brown, the safety that had to play a little bit last year. Mike Brown and whoever number 40 was. Number 40 was guarding Ridley. And so Mason Kinsey was apparently in on the play. Just trying to gather what I can see. As the Titans had OTAs today, they will have an open OTA tomorrow. So the media will be out there, and trust me, they will see Cam Ward for the first time in a Titan uniform, throwing to Titan players against a Titan defense in person. That will be tomorrow. Now, I think that this was done on purpose to put this out there to let everybody know, hey, Cam's going with the ones so that it won't be such a shock tomorrow if Cam Ward does, in fact, go out there and play with the first team. And this is something that is positive. People love things that are positive. So they're saying, hey, everybody out there, look at this throw to Calvin Ridley. Here's what I'm going to say about practice. And I feel like I'm entitled to say this because last year you all told me that none of this mattered. I'm not expecting Cam Ward to be Dan Marino on day one, but it doesn't not mean something. We've had this odd thing that's happened over the years when it comes to practice. I see all the data. I see all the numbers. You people eat up practice discussions. I go to practice, and I'm not here to sit there and talk about how hard it is to do all of this in one day, but I will go to practice at like 9:30 in the morning. That practice will run until 11:30, 11:45 noon. They'll have press conferences, and then I will hop in the shower and rush on the air, and for 4 hours, basically recap that practice every day for the first 3 weeks until they're done with joint practices of training camp. And I wouldn't do it if I didn't see how much people ate that stuff up. But what happens when it comes to practice and practice reports, and you'll see this a lot from local media people. I'm not talking about from the Titans local media. I'm just talking about from local media people in the NFL as a whole. Is you'll see when things are good, that gets highlighted. When things are bad, there is context added to make it seem like it's not that big of a deal. Last year, there was an open OTA where apparently Will Levis threw a pass that was high for Josh Wiley that went and bounced outside the practice facility perimeter and landed in the lake. And as I was on the air, Jim Wyatt put out his practice report. We had Chris Sanders on the show when it happened. And I read the report, and Chris Sanders and I started howling. We were laughing so hard. He threw a ball in the lake. Oh, we laughed and we laughed. And again, this was on Titan Stationary. This came from Jim Wyatt. We were laughing about it. We thought it was so funny. I'm like, Chris, you played at that practice facility. Have you ever seen somebody throw a ball in the lake? And he was like, no, I haven't seen somebody throw a ball in the lake. Then all of a sudden, at the end of the show, we started getting some calls. Not calls on the air, but we were getting some behind-the-scenes calls saying, no. The ball bounced into the lake. And then Jim Wyatt rewrote the story or edited the story to make sure that everybody knew the ball bounced in the lake. Well, that doesn't count then, I guess, right? Then Levis had a bad day, 7-on-7 in OTAs, and Brian Callahan got out there and talked about Nard's defense. and how good that Ravens defense is. And that's why he hired Denard Wilson and the defense did well and blah, 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 and everything else. Again, we dismiss that. We make an excuse for that. Then there were the Seattle practices where they couldn't get a first down. We made excuses for that. Remember, Calvin Ridley said it was hot. Brian Callahan said it was hot. Calvin Ridley said he wasn't running hard. So if something doesn't go well in practice, the natural inclination is to just pretend that that did not happen. Mike Vrabel, same way. Mike Vrabel, every day, OTAs, it was obvious. Arden Key was just blowing by Andre Dillard. Vrabel asked about it. Hey, man, your left tackle looks like he kind of sucks. What's the deal there, Mike? Vrabel. Well, I mean, Arden is obviously, Javon Curse 2.0, so that's why he's struggling. No, he's struggling because he sucks. Sorry. So here's what I've decided. If you stink in practice, you stink in practice. And if you're going to stink in practice, you're most likely to stink in the game. With the exception of Treylon Burks and Kyle Phillips, there are very few players that at times are very, very good in practice and are very, very rarely good in the games. And even Burks, go back to his rookie year, had his moments where he did look good in the games. So I'm not saying that tomorrow's practice is going to be the end-all, be-all as far as Cam Ward is concerned, that he's going to go out there and he's going to throw 2 interceptions. He's a bust. But it's not nothing. Drake May last week for the Patriots. Remember, Vrabel's a new coach, so they get to start their off seasons a little earlier. Drake May threw a bunch of interceptions in practice for the New England Patriots. And I saw people there talking about that. And again, I have no bias towards the Patriots. I used to like the Patriots. I used to work up there. I used to cover the team, but I'm not a huge Patriot fan. Obviously, you know that I have my feelings about Vrabel. I think Vrabel's a good coach, but I think Vrabel can be a hardhead sometimes. I mean, I thought Drake May was a great prospect coming out of North Carolina. I loved him. But that doesn't mean that he didn't throw those interceptions. I saw that first day, year 2, OTAs, bunch of interceptions, red flag. So, again, I'm saying this now as it's almost like an orientation type breakdown for you guys. But don't come to me this year with, Cam didn't do well in practice. Doesn't count. Don't do that. Again, we played the cut from Belichick's audio book where he basically said, if you can't execute in practice, you're not going to execute in the game. That's like guys throw interceptions. They say, well, they're trying things. Yeah, sure. This is not a bullpen session on the second day of spring training. This is competitive practice, and there's only so many of these. So, we shall see how Cam does tomorrow. Again, somebody's going to be right. Either Cam's the next Mahomes, and again, I don't think we'll know that tomorrow, but either Cam is the next Mahomes and the Titans are on their way, or 3 years from now, we'll probably be in the exact same spot. But I'm just saying right now, you guys know me. If Cam goes out there and lights it up on the first day of practice, I'm going to say it the way it is. But I'm also not going to ignore it if he doesn't do well. And sometimes I think some of you do that. I think it's your natural inclination. It's convenient to say, well, the practice wasn't very good, so it doesn't count. No, it matters. It mattered last year with Will Levis. You guys just didn't want to believe it. Wanted to rewrite the story. The ball bounced in the lake. It didn't actually go into the lake. Sure. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. And there's another thing I'm going to be looking at in the Titans practice tomorrow. I want to get to that, and we'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company Titans OTAs tomorrow. Again, the Titans are putting out some videos on social media, just trying to see who's playing with whom and things of that magnitude. But we'll get to see Cam Ward out there. Somebody texted into the text line and said the practice is going to be open to the public. No, they are not. OTAs, voluntary work, that's just media. So you'll have to hear what the people that went out there. I may go out there tomorrow. I have no idea. But you'll just have to hear what they say, what happened, and so on and so forth. So another thing that's happening tomorrow is the coordinators are speaking. So Nick Holtz will meet with the media. Denard Wilson will meet with the media. Bones Fossil will meet with the media. I'm not worried about Bones Fossil. First of all, the guy's got a great reputation as a special teams coach. I also met Bones Fossil once years ago. I really like him. He'll be fine. Not that me liking him is why he'll be fine, but I think he'll be fine. You know, TD and I kind of were talking about this on Thursday's show during the Power Hour about why Brian Callahan kept Denard Wilson and Nick Holtz. And I know that, hey, if they're coaching the players to do something and the players aren't doing it, then whose fault is that? Well, I would argue it's the coach's fault. And so I was incredibly unimpressed with Brian Callahan's coaching staff last year, and Brian Callahan brought back a majority of that coaching staff. So one thing I will be keeping an eye on tomorrow is, do we see a change in demeanor between Holtz and Wilson? I really liked Denard Wilson at first last year, you know, because he felt like a good energy guy, good motivator. But then by week 3 or 4, whenever it was, that he's out there talking about how Jeffrey Simmons is getting a bunch of pressure, but then saying that Jeffrey Simmons isn't getting a bunch of pressure, and then saying that once Arden Key heats up, you know, once the team heats up, then Arden Key will heat up. You know, that stuff really rubbed me the wrong way. I mean, I just felt just awful listening to that last year. So I am not impressed with what I've seen out of Denard Wilson in the defense. I'm not impressed with Nick Holtz. I think Callahan needs some better help around him if he's going to call the plays and run the offense. So we'll keep an eye on that for tomorrow. Finally, I have to get this off my chest. Well, hold on. Let me react to Larry's text first. I can't go by what you say about practice either, because you were just waiting for the smallest little mistake to trash Cam Ward. Face it, you don't want him to succeed. No, Larry, I do want him to succeed. My son is almost 6 months old, which means that if Cam Ward is that guy, if he is Mahomes, then my son will get to grow up with the next great quarterback and supporting the Titans. And I want that. I am a Titan fan. I want them to be good. And there's going to be mistakes along the way. But I'm not trying to trash Cam Ward, and I'm certainly not rooting against Cam Ward. All right, the other thing I got to get off my chest. I'm rooting against the New York Knicks in basketball. I am really rooting against the New York Knicks. And I can't tell you why. They're not a dislikable team. Jalen Brunson is a very good player. You know, the Knicks have some real scrotum to them. Like, they really bring it every game. Like, I appreciate that. They play hard. These games go down to the wire. I've caught myself watching basketball more than, because these games, again, they go right down to the end. I was shocked the other night when I turned the game off and I woke up and saw that the Knicks lost. But I'm rooting against the Knicks. And I don't know why. And the only theory I can come up with, and I was asking my friends about this weekend, the only thing I can come up with is, I think ESPN is so over the top when it comes to Knicks fandom and homerism. Every topic about the Knicks is about, they win a game, and it's like, are they going to win the finals? And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, let's treat the Knicks like every other team. I know they play at Madison Square Garden. I know they're the New York Knicks, but we don't treat anybody else like this. And then there's the little Pacers. It's like everyone's like, oh yeah, they're Indiana. They're no good. I'm like, they're pretty darn good. Halliburton, he's a bad dude. Like, they are good. So I can't explain it. I will be watching basketball tonight. I don't know about you guys. I will be watching the Eastern Conference Final. I'll be watching Game 4. If Indiana wins tonight, it's over. I will be rooting for Indiana. I don't know why. I will be rooting against the Knicks. I expect the Knicks to win. I don't know if that's Scott Foster who reffed game 3. They call him the extender because when the NBA needs the series extended, Scott Foster just happens to be reffing that game. I don't know if he's reffing tonight or not. Maybe he is. I expect the Knicks to win. I would bet on the Knicks to win, but I am rooting against them. And again, I can't exactly tell you what it is about the New York Knicks that makes me dislike them or want Indiana to win, but I do. I want Indiana to win. So good luck to the Pacers. And again, tomorrow is a big day because tomorrow is the first time that the media will be able to see without the Titans deciding exactly what doctored film to put out there of Cam Ward, the savior of the franchise, going up against a defense wearing a helmet, throwing to receivers for the first time. And of course, tomorrow, we will have you completely and totally updated. That is it for us. We are out of here today. Enjoy the basketball tonight, Stillman and Company. We will see everybody, as we always do, tomorrow at 2.